Ayin Beis, Volume 1, we're up to chapter 139. Page 268, and the middle of discourse 35. So now, we've been talking about two types of yichudim, two types of unifications. One that maintains and is, let's put it this way, relates more to the parameters of existence. In the world of Meichen and Midas means how intellect relates to the Midas. Midas, as we've discussed, means not just emotions, but also inclinations, applications. So Midas comes to become a far more broader term. Like we said, Midas is shaykh la zulas. Midas means you're already relating to something outside of yourself. Meichen, we learned, is far more internal. So when we say Midas, we're already talking about a relationship to existence in Atzilus itself. And this is called the Yichud of Yisrael Saba Tfuna, which is essentially Chochma, Binah, Abba, Ve'ima, Tatoyin. Why is it Tatoyin? Because it's relating already to Zah, to the Midas. Initially it's the Midas, the inclinations within the mind, but it also will begin also to be the source of the emotions and the Midas as they are, the faculties as they are in their own state of being. Lower than that is Yisrael Zuta and Yaakov, but Yisrael Saba and Tfuna, which is the Midas in Meichen, then in the He in Abba and Ima, the He meaning even more applying itself to the student, the Kloyeshetz is the way to convey it. So clearly we see it's not intellect on its own, it's the way it's relating to something outside of itself. Like he says, Dover HaNivdal Mimenu. And then the last chapter, in the last two chapters, he moved even further and said, now, and went to the second Yichud, that based on the Pri Etz Chaim, that Yisrael Saba Tfuna is really the Hey, because it's Binah. Binah already in. So if Nehi and Chochma and Binah in within is closer to so-called relationship to something be outside of itself. So between Chochma and Binah is closer to what's outside of itself because it's already comprehension, and Chochma is more intimate and internal. So he says that this is the Yud and the Hey. So Yisrael Saba Tfuna is the Hey. So even Yisrael Saba, which is Chochma, is also really through the lens of Binah. That's what he said. It's already how the Yud is nichlol in the Hey. And then we come to Yichud Abba Ve'ima Ilayin, the higher, supernal, so to speak, Abba Ve'ima, how they are really purely on their own. Intellect that it's on its own, which means no relationship with anything outside of itself. You can't say no, but far more removed. And that's the Yud. And the Yud also has a Hey, it also has a Binah, but now it's Binah and it's Abba Ve'ima as they stand above the relationship to beyond. Well, and he explained that's the Atzilus Sheba Atzilus, whereas the second one is Bria Sheba Atzilus, which also implies Atzilus Sheba Atzilus is far more within, and Bria Sheba Atzilus, which explained at length, that's Atzmus HaChochma, the core Chochma relates far more to the source, all the way to the Chochma of the 10 hidden spheres, and even deeper than that. 1 second. Yeah, good. And the last chapter, he went to give us a taste of what means Hasagas HaMuhus, which is this so-called inner core essence of Chochma. What is it like? Though we can't fully understand it today. But a little Ephes could say, he wants to give us a little taste. So his example was of the Kudus Ha, as he called it, the Kudus HaSkola, the resonating element that is still in the world of Seichel, but it's something above Seichel. So he senses a conviction, as Vetem Recht and as Zeir Gut, that sense. So there is an element of Seichel, but there's an element of beyond Seichel. So he wants to show, as I said, we're moving now to a level that is not related to the lower levels, it's related to higher levels. So this conviction, this resonance, when you don't fully comprehend it yet, where does it come from? So clearly it's coming from something, as he puts it, a very powerful expression, What is the dominating force is that conviction. And then comes another stage as it comes into, because at that point he doesn't yet comprehend it. He just senses a certain truth. Then he speaks about how, once it comes into Asagah, it moves away from that place. Or better said, it's concealed, that Hanochas Sichlis. But then when you come to the conclusion of Binah, and we're still talking all in the core concept here. We're not talking about how it relates to applications afterwards. Midas, like you spoke earlier, like when you were already coming to the conclusion of a process. So Sabat Fun is the conclusion of a process. The Midas, whether you're going to lean toward Isser, Zchus, or Din. But here we're talking when it comes to a conclusion, which is called the summary, Nekudas Tamtzis, and that already has a connection to that resonating point. It's now, however, already internalized. Before it wasn't internalized. Now it's internalized. So basically, it's the yichud of Chochma and Binah Ilayin, because it's Nekuda Behechla. The Nekuda of Chochma has now a resting place. It has its chamber. And the last line was Meitzer Yam, and Meitzer Mi. Meitzer Mi is Binah, Meitzer Yam is Yam HaChochma, and there's a connection. It doesn't explain it, it just says there's this connection. I went back to this piece that I think you may be right. So far, it may be the closest thing. When he says Hisamtus, the Chochma, because the last place where he used that expression was in Sol Sab and Tfuna, actually a lower level. And there he used the expression, where did he use it? Right here. He may be trying to answer a question. Because if you recall, when he spoke on the lower level, Yisrael Shab and Tfuna, he said that there's also the pure idea, but Yisrael Shab and Tfuna is how the idea, he spoke about the Etzem HaMeichin there, and then he says, then the Seichel Hamata Klapi Chesed. He spoke the second interpretation, what means Midah Shebemeichin. He says it's not his Spilus Sichli, right? He was speaking about the Netias. And he goes into the whole discussion there, how that be'etzim seichel you don't really have yet an inclination. You're just reviewing the subject in every angle possible. But then comes a point where you begin to have an inclination. And to the point that he explained clearly, we're not talking emotions, it's intelligence, but it's an intelligence after a long process of contemplation, you come to conclusion, this person merits. So it's an intellectual conclusion. It's chesed as a result of a seichel. In other words, your seichel is mechayiv, your research and your comprehension compels you to say this person merited. So you have a chesed shebemeichin. That was Yisrael Sab and Tfuna. But then the question is, what's the difference between the nehi of Chochma and the nehi of Binah? In that case, again, so we're not talking that's some seichel now. We're talking as an inclination. So he said the difference is. I'm just going over that because I think that may be his question, what he's trying to so-called qualify. So he says like this. I'm reading the bottom of 262. Then brought Shosik Rav. So there's also a resonant element. Right? That Shosik Rav, that his Chochma compels him to sense that this is Isur, that it's Chesed or Din. But he can't. And in Binah, he can actually explain it betuv tam b'svaris b'chayovas. So here's the question now. Here's the question. Chochma is not a developed idea. Chochma is the spark of the idea. And yet we're saying there's a samtas there, there's a certain inclination that this person is zeicha, is merits it or does not merit. Chesed and Gvura. How is that different than what we're talking here, where the mind has a certain resonating element? There clearly it's a lower level in Chochma. It's already nehi of Chochma. Here you're talking, it's Chochma of Chochma, or whatever, the core Chochma. So clearly, what's the difference? In other words, what's the difference in Shosik Rav and what we're talking about here? That's what it looks like he's trying to qualify. So that's why he's saying, I'm saying that, so when he say so, that's what, let's just go over to that word. I mean, I'm assuming, I'm not sure because it's very short, but he says, let's say add, which leads to an etiyah to chesed gvura and shasik rav hi bisyashvus. In other words, in Chochma itself, there's two types of, there's levels. I don't really understand the difference because I don't understand how Chochma can come to a type of isyashvus without Binah. He made it very clear there's no isyashvus. But I guess you can say that maybe what he really means there is that there's Chochma and Binah, but the Chochma part is sensing it without really explaining. And the Binah part can explain it. Even though I don't know exactly how to. Aval hanocha now. Ein ze in nisamtus. In other words, the resonance we're talking about here is far higher than the samtus there. Why is it higher? Because here he said clearly that a person he's not yet understand the idea at all, and yet he senses a certain truth. By Shasik Rav, that's not the case. They're the opposite. He went through it, he studied it, and his mind has compelled him to chesed. It's a whole different type of. That's the end of the process. Except we have to understand what's the end of the. I mean, the question is really not on this chapter. The question is back there. What is his samtus mitzad Chochma as opposed to Binah? But the bottom line is clearly there. It's the end of a logical process, and here it's at the beginning of the process. Mitzad Chochma. Binah, Nekuda Tamsis, the summary is the end. But here the Hanoch is before, because he says clearly that when he starts thinking about it, he sees he doesn't get it yet, even though he senses truth. So I guess what he's saying is that here he's talking about the sense of truth right in the beginning of a process. You just sense something, and then comes the process of trying to understand it. And there, it's almost like I mean, you almost want to say that a judge or someone should not be having this type of sensation, because then what is it based on? He didn't hear any witnesses. He didn't process it. But nevertheless, there is such a concept where a person has a certain conviction. You hear something, you have a certain conviction. But there, he's talking about a more legal process where you go through the whole process, and there. So the distinction is clear. I'm saying I'm agreeing with you. Okay, I didn't say it wasn't. I just said I didn't know how it comes in here. Now I realize that he's trying to qualify because it is relevant here. Because it's almost like someone reads this and say, "1 second, this sounds awfully similar to Shasik Rav." And Shasik Rav is Yisrael Saba, not Chochma Etzem.
The same process going over and over again. At this point, it's like he smells the truth. He smells the truth.
But that's Chochma, not Binah.
Yes, smell the truth. It's Chochma Sheva Chochma. It's actually smell the truth.
No, Samtus is not Chochma Sheva Chochma. His Samtus is Nehi of Abba, Nehi of Chochma.
It'll say here that his Samtus is Chochma Sheva Chochma.
I don't know what it says. I know what I've learned till now.
And I looked ahead.
It's fine.
It's mamish. What I think.
No. But
he's talking about, if you don't mind, what I think he's talking about is after the process of Tamsis Binah, and this is what I remember from learning previously. After the process of Tamsis Binah, then you go back up into Chochma. Now that's where you find his Tamsis Chochma.
I don't want to go there because I've not learned that yet. There's no. You may be ahead of the game. What I'm saying now is based on how I understand where we are right now and what he's trying to qualify here.
But that would explain what I said. Would explain.
No, but I'm.
You can say his yashus in this hamsus the chochma.
What you said now doesn't make sense to me. By the way, just now, if the Rebbe Rashab says it, we'll deal with it. What you just said now, I don't really relate to. Just for the record, but that doesn't mean anything. Let's say you say it's from here. So if it's going to be here, it's going to come, right? So we'll get there. There's no reason to jump the gun. I'm just saying right now that to me that's what it qualifies, because that question is a very obvious question. There's also a type of resonance. The thing that, as I said, I just want to repeat, what I don't understand completely is how from Chochma you can come to any type of midah when Chochma is not a process, it's only a flash. And yet he still calls it a samtus of Chochma, back by Shasik Rav. That to me, I'm not really clear completely. Unless he's saying, as I said, it's after the Binah and it's with Sad Chochma. Let me just see a second. Like almost similar to what he said about Klei Sheitzis. It's the seeds are there in Chochma, but they don't come to full manifestation. How to explain it to a student without niklet, without it being retained by you. So it could be the same thing as there. In other words, Rav, Shosik Rav, he also went through Binah. It wasn't just he had a flash, but there's something that remained. The Chochma, the midas of the Chochma, remain above him being able to fully explain it. That's how I probably would say. So that's what it's like that. Like similar to the resonance, but it's on a far lower level. Because there he says it is Isyashvus.
Perhaps it's on fire for a higher level.
No, if it's Isyashvus, it can't be a higher level.
Why not? After it's gone through the process of Binah, then it's
that's already so. That's a lower level. In the sense that's after the process.
After you finish Binah, then you go back up and back.
Yeah, if someone says that, he doesn't say that here. Here he's going like this. He doesn't going back. I mean, after the summary, we'll see. Let's see if he says it. I'm not going to fight with it. On the contrary, let's continue on. In other words, it's not. It's not true. It's not correct. You keep saying things like this that it makes me crazy. There's real distinctions. It's not true. Some things are not Isyashvus. You make it sound like even when you don't understand, you understand. What does that mean?
There are different levels of Isyashvus.
Yeah, but there are times that you don't understand something and it's not Isyashvus.
I didn't say everything, but I said on each level,
Yeah, but he's not saying that. He's saying clearly that this resonance does not have Isyashvus. He says it. It's not my words. So why would we try to force that to say opposite?
The lack of Isyashvus means that it's not explainable.
Whatever, but the words he uses here, there's no Isyashvus. He says,
how do you can we define Isyashvus?
I explained it, yeah. He can't comprehend it. He just I said comprehend. I used the word intentionally. He doesn't have a song. He says he elaborated. He said he has a sense, and then when he tries to, I gave you an example yesterday. People say, I sense something, and then someone says, okay, tell it to me, and you can't say a word. Mm-hmm. That means there's no Isyashvus. Yeah. That means it's not yours. I mean, that's the simplest explanation. What you're trying to say is that obviously every experience is an experience. Even Chochma but he's not qualifying that. You're saying is that as soon as it comes to your head, there's already something compared to when it wasn't there. That's what you're suggesting. But then when you do that, you blur the line. Then so how do you distinguish Chochma and Binah? You know what I'm saying? Hello? Look. Everything is everything. It's not going to help understand Ayin Beis. You want to have distinctions. There are clear distinctions between one level and the next. It's the bottom line. Or else the whole thing falls apart. You could say the Avos also brought a Yichud Chadash. So then what Man and Torah accomplish? It's all relative? It's not relative. There's a real difference. They bring it in the structure of existence. This is beyond the structure.
True, but are we trying to blur the line between Chochma and Binah so we can say there's Sagar, there's Malchus?
No, actually we're not trying to blur it. It would be like this. We live in a world of structures. We want switches that connect. If you start blurring the switches, you're not going to have an integrated circuit. You're going to have destruction, annihilation. You want to have the structure of existence intact. So you first have to have clear delineation. Then you create channels that connect one to the next. Look at a healthy human being. Okay, would you like to blur the line between, let's say, the windpipe and the food pipe?
No, I didn't mean that. I meant
right?
Exactly what you're saying.
And then when you don't blur the line, then they work together. I didn't say they can't work together, but the key here is there has to be true diversity here for this. Right? Exactly. How many within diversity? And you see, I'm specifically using a physical example. If the heart valves don't close when they should close, God forbid, etc., etc. Yeah. So the Rabbi often would say an expression which was very beautiful. He used to say, if you want to be ma'achet, you first have to have Havdalah. Havdalah ben Shabbos. You say Havdalah, Hamavdil ben Chedesh l'Chel. What do you mean Mavdil? It's all God. Same God that created Chedesh created Chel. But Havdalah is not coming to say that there's less God. Havdalah is coming to say that the God wants a real structure. And when you know this is Shabbos and this is Chel, then this is Shabbos, this is profane, and this is holy, then you can bring the holiness can enter the Chel. If you don't make this distinction, you're having is just blurring the lines and you don't have anything. The Kodesh will be compromised, the Chel will be compromised. There's a real Havdalah. There are real lines that were drawn that God created. This is the Koyach HaGvul. It's not a joke. It's not Koyach HaGvul is not illusionary power. He created real Gvul. Real Hagbolas. The sea has a place, Atkan. It has a boundary. It can't go on the land. And that's it. And if it goes on the land, there's destruction. I mean, this is not meant to eliminate the unity that's within, etc. It's meant to understand that God is not bound by cloning. We don't have to all be the same to be connected to Hashem Echad. The Hashem Echad can manifest in infinite different possibilities, and then there's an integral unity behind it all. We've had this. The reason I'm adamant about it is because we go back to the quantum. I told you many times, Chassidus goes beyond quantum. Quantum comes to say that it's all connected. And Chassidus comes to say that it's still distinguished and still connected. It's even a bigger paradox than quantum mechanics. I've spoken about this with some quantum theorists. This part they can't even relate to. Because this is the problem. But see, the problem, quantum mechanics works only on the microscopic level, not on the macroscopic. Nobody can reconcile that. In Chassidus it's completely reconcilable, because both realities are God's. One is Koyach HaGvul, one is Koyach HaBlikvul. You can say quantum is much more Koyach HaBlikvul, where the field of energy, everything is one field of energy, but God also has the power to manifest it in a structure. So, it's true, scientists first started with the structure, then they came to realize beyond structure, and then there's a third step, that beyond structure can end up in structure. You follow what I just said? That's the key. That last step is the thing that nobody, what Chassidus explains well. That's why a mitzvah. Because if you're going into the quantum realities of the field of energy, who really cares? You do a sheer mitzvah chazayas, not a chazayas, a crumb on Pesach, a switch on Shabbos, who cares? You're in the field of energy. Eira bligvul. A little detail matters. The answer is yeah, because God is not bound by bligvul either. And in the detail, you got to have the whole bligvul. That's the hardest. This last step is the hardest one for people to relate to, because anyone that's in the field of energy, details are trivial. A detail ahead, detail ayin, but they happen to be critical in the big picture. Chochma and Binah is in microcosm what we're talking about. Chochma is more bligvul here, and Binah is more gvul. And yes, of course, he wants them to meet. That's the interface. But you can't begin with the meeting without first distinguishing.
Yeah, well, okay. Yep.
And if you just go into the abstraction of it, it'll become blurred. You want to have it very as structured as possible, but then you can really appreciate what the interface accomplishes. That's why I say with Avodah, in mathematics, you can have it all figured out. Okay, Binah here, Chochma here, blah blah. Here's a switch. Now they're connected. But when you work on it yourself, that's why I use the windpipe and the air pipe. It's not so simple. We live in a very finite world. You need to pay your bills today. You have to eat. You have to sleep. You have limitations that are not. You can't just say I'm the world of Eira Bligvul, even though this class sometimes just gives us a taste of it. Beyond schedule, etc., etc. There's man. Today is Wednesday, not Thursday, and you do it. And over Batel Karbonah. Explain that one. If it's all the Mailam is man, who cares? You bring tomorrow. You put on film tomorrow for 2 days. Time, what's time? Time is a very very mundane. It's all the Mailam Zman. Atzilus is here all the time. And real halachas. I'm not talking about giving in to so-called human weakness. The human people live on this world, so they have to respect time. Like that. You're talking about real halachas. Over Zmani, Batel Karboni. The time passes. You can't daven mincha at a certain time. That's it. It's over. God is here all the time. Why suddenly he can't hear a mincha? In the middle of the night. What's the problem? What's because in the mysterious way the structure has meaning. He wants the structure. We can't fully understand it. But I'm just so that's why I'm very adamant not to just make everything, because then you destroy the whole point of the structure.
But there is a similar process. It's a similar process. It's like Chochma Binah within Chochma. He told us many, many times.
Listen, there's microcosm, macrocosm all the time. Yes,
so
correct.
I think that's what we're basically dealing with right here.
No, but he's not saying that here. No. When he wants to say it, he says it. He's not bashful. See, there are times where he says that. There are times where he'll say, if you remember, that everything we just learned now is also in Malchus of Atzilus. Remember that. Or everything we said now is not so, like he said, Chochma is all the way in the Chochma of the 10 hidden spheres. The Rebbe Rashab says it when he wants to say it. When he doesn't want to say it, because he's now looking at dissecting it and wants to make the distinctions. Obviously, there is a kiskalus, but it's not the same thing. To say the Binah within Chochma is like the Binah within Binah is not at all the same thing. It's very different realities. That's like saying you have similar cells in your brain as you have in your heart. But this is a heart, that's a brain, that's that. The heart is not the brain. So yes, cut to the deepest core, there's the fundamental similarities in all our DNA. And they're embedded everywhere, but then there's the distinction. It's not a contradiction. I don't see the contradiction. It just depends what you're focusing on. Look, it's far easier. When I was learning Chassidus, when I was far younger, I used to remember, it's to say to myself, this pasuk, that pasuk, it's the same inyanim everywhere. They're just fitting it into different pasukim. And I used to say to myself, the pasuk, I used to skip the pasukim many times, like the beginning of a maimer and so on. You learn it because the pasuk was like, not that it wasn't, God forbid, I didn't see it as trivial. I saw it as like, the passport, as they call it. The way to get into the subject. So you start with a pasuk and ask questions. Then the more I started learning, then I realized that, on the contrary, you look at the end of the Maimon in the beginning, there's a depth. The pasuk actually is a channel to really relate to it. First of all, it's grounded in Torah Shebeksav, in Torah, written. And also, the details do matter. The details give you a different perspective on the big picture. You can say Dira b'tachtenim. Okay, I can find the concept of Dira b'tachtenim in every pasuk in Torah. But that's laziness, really. You're going right to the chase, to the concept. And truth is, Dira b'tachtenim in this pasuk has this nuance, and this is a different detail, and the details do matter. And I remember myself really going through this process of today. It's a whole different world. Today, I look specifically in the pasukim because the diuk in the pasuk helps understand a nuance in the haskalah of it, in the concept, not just fitting it into the pasuk.
Isn't that funny? Because he happened to be up to this part of the Torah in time, and he was up to this stage of thinking.
No, because listen, you can find anything in any pasuk. It's correct.
There's two different.
Yeah, but once they do, listen. When I could tell you like this. If right now a Talmud Chacham makes a connection between, let's say, today Wednesday and what we're learning with the pasuk and Torah, and an Amoritz makes a connection, there's going to be a difference. One is going to put together like a vant savant, two, that it may even fit, but it's not. A person who knows Torah reads a pasuk, he reads a pasuk differently, and it's not just forced. It's true. I agree. I understand. It could have been a different pasuk. But nevertheless, whatever pasuk it would be, it's in the pasuk. I'm not suggesting that everything is hidden in the first opening. I'm saying is that in general, when you learn Chassidus, the psukim and the particular details actually give you a different richness. They're not just the same idea repeated and just fit into a bunch of different stuff. But that's not what I'm addressing now. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm trying to say is that the different psukim, as they explain them, actually give different elements of the concept. They're not just it's Eidos Mitziyarim. It's not just taking the same psukim and they're colorless and you fit them into the same colored cups. The psukim themselves have different truths, so to speak. Okay, let's continue. Kuf Lamed Tes. Let's see. Look, he hasn't spelled it all out. The whole process. We have elements of it. We have now that the Chochma, the resonance. We have it comes into Hasaga, comprehension. We have the Nekudas Atamtzis, the summary. We have what we learned earlier. Yisrael Sabbat Tfuna Hameichen goes into Midas. He hasn't yet really given us all the whole picture. Maybe that's where we're going here. I hope he does, because as I said, this is the process. This in microcosm in Atzilus is what's going on in macrocosm, the whole Ishtalshlus, which is the connection between Meichen and Midas is essentially the connection between the La'atzmei and the Lezulas. That's what it really comes down to. So on a higher level, it's just purely energy, the energy to himself and the energy outwards. In the human in the faculties, it's Meichen and Midas, and you see that you could see very clearly because he's using the words Nifrid Memenu, La'atzmei. The idea is very clear. And he moved his way upward. Even though it was Kabbalistic, but if you start thinking, it really has a very Yaakov, Yisrael Zuta, Yisrael Saba, Tfuna, and now Chochma Abba Imi Elan. And it's really beautiful, intellect on its own. That's where we are right now. And now within that, Chochma and Binah. That's essentially what he's right now addressing.
In the next book, he goes like in parallel with davening and mirror. I mean, all these concepts. It's amazing. It's such a whole like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Like everything is covered. Everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So here we go. Chapter Kuf Lamed Tes 139, bottom of 268. And this that we just said. Remember we said that Primius Binah connects with Primius, with Nekudas HaChochma, and Nekuda Behechala. So you have a point or a germ within its chamber. So you have this type of unity between Chochma and Binah. It's called Metzuyah, Metzuyah. So he says to understand the Inyan of Nikra, what is called Metzuyah, Metzuyah, which was Chochma and Binah. Yuvens al derech Moshel will understand this as with an example of a b'mashpia b'makabel, a teacher and student, or a transmitter and a recipient. Sometimes Rav and Talmud is used. That's teacher-student. Mashpia makabel is often also mashpia, someone who's. But mashpia makabel could also be ish and isha, and a husband and wife, not just Rav and Talmud. Mashpia makabel. Yesh b'zeh gam ken chitzenis u'pnimis. Okay, in Mashpia Makabel there's also an outer and an inner. What's the Gamkein? Because remember, we've been talking everything here about Yichud Chochma Abba V'Ima Tatayin, which is more Chetzenis Chochma Binah, and Yichud Abba V'Ima Ilon, which is more Pnimis Avin. We've also been talking about the Kav. The Kav, Chetzenis HaKav, Pnimis HaKav. So you see here, there's two tracks going on here, the Yichud for the Elamus, for maintenance, like Yichud Chutzeni and Yichud Pnimi. That was the words, I think, almost of the Pardes, right? It was Yichud, it doesn't say Yichud Chutzeni, Yichud Pnimi, but sometimes that's what it says, Yichud Chutzeni, Yichud Pnimi. It's very interesting. Okay, so there's two types of Yichudim here. So he says the Chutzeni Pnimi. So now explain. V'achutzeni shu shekasher ha'makabel shemei rak Chutzeni sasechel. What's the Chutzeni? It's the outer, the more it's called superficial or outer dimension. And that's when the makabel, the recipient, hears only the chetzenius hasechel, only the outer dimension of the idea, of the concept, of the intelligence. And he hears how they're presented, how the ideas are presented in the seichel and the chetzenius dika level. Not sure what that means. I mean, there's a lot of ways to explain that, but let's see how he's going here, and we'll see. What does that Katsanius mean? That all kolin yoni of the makabel, all his entire let's call it investment here, is in order to receive the muskul, to receive the concept, the idea, kameishahu. The way it's comprehended in the garments of comprehension. And it does not descend, it's not yedid when you say yedid l'sefer inyan. It means reach. He's not reaching. Yedid here, in other words, doesn't mean rida per se. It means reaching, achieving. Or also, going, penetrating. To the ultimate purpose of knowing Tachlis HaKavanah, the ultimate purpose with Tamtzis HaMusig and the summation of the comprehension of the idea. So that's what means Chitzenis HaSeichel. So in other words, it's what I sometimes say here. You could learn a piece and understand what it says, but you're not reading the flow. You're not reading the beginning, where is he going with it, and so on. So you're understanding a paragraph, you're understanding a chapter. And then there's going to the big picture here, so to speak. The Tachlis HaKavona and the Tamtzis HaMusig. So sometimes a person, like you can win a battle and lose a war, sometimes you can get a subject but lose the whole concept. So you could, because you're not really, you lost context or whatever it may be. That's what he's calling Chitzenis HaSeichel here. That's from the perspective of the makabel. Where is he going with this? I'm not sure yet, but we'll let it develop. I mean, it's clearly he's going to explain what he's saying here. Binah and Chochma. That's from the perspective of the Makabel. Now, Gama Mashpia, Eina Mashpia La'emek Eisei HaSeichel, Rak Mechatzeni Shalei. Also from the perspective of the Mashpia. What he's transmitting is not transmitting Emek Eisei HaSeichel, the depth of the idea. He's giving him the basic concept. Not only the external element of it. I can give some examples, but I want to first read it till the end before we give an example of a seichel where you give the chitzenius and not the pnimius. And when the recipient asks a question, asks something to the mashpia, in that idea that is being conveyed, his question will only be in the surface of the subject. Hamashpia meishivlei. It's interesting. It doesn't say v'hamashpia. It's like he's telling a story. And the mashpia meishivlei, and the mashpia responds to him. Mashaboloi bashkofa deshena. What comes to him ostensibly at first glance, hanikra muskulishin, which is called muskulishin. It's called like the first thought. Muskulishin is usually axioms. Does it mean something else there? Which means what came to him, what arose in his mind at first glance, in his first response, which is only the external element of the idea. Okay, yeah, this is not muskulishin that we usually say. Muskulishin is often a reference to axioms. It's actually considered to be very fundamental. Here he's using it a bit differently, unless he means the same thing. But muskul rishon usually is axioms, like muskolos rishenis. You establish, here are my assumptions, and based on that, we're going to discuss so and so. But here he's speaking it more in terms of like an order. That in other words, the whole. Remember, the student is receiving only is not getting to the emek and tachlis, just understanding the idea that's being said. Right, it's a piece of an idea. The mashpia is also only teaching him not from the depth, but the chitzenius. And when he asks something, the question is a surface level question, and the answer is a surface level answer. That's what he's saying here. The first answer, the first like quick answer, so to speak. He's not giving him a fundamental answer that deals with the whole picture, because they're not addressing the whole picture. I have some examples, but I don't want to go there till I want to finish this and see exactly it. And he doesn't make an effort to reveal to him the depth and the inner dimensions of the subject matter. That's chitzeni. That's chitzenius. Okay, that's the yichud chitzenius of Chochma and Binah. That's clear. Okay, let me give an example, because he didn't get to the premise. We'll just give an example, and hopefully it's consistent, and if not, I'll correct myself later. I don't like to do it, but I think it's just helpful to understand. I mean, the best way to relate to this is if you find something that you're an expert in. Hopefully everybody here is an expert in something. Okay. Some people are experts in worrying and anxiety. It's also there's, Right. I have a guy in my class, his name is Philip Namaworth. He's a very knowledgeable guy. When I met him, he was Hindu. Today he's a very scholarly Jew, very. And so he's a singer-songwriter. So he has a song, "My mission is to worry." My soul was sent. Basically, his soul was sent down to worry. It's a very funny song. He has some great lines. He has a line there: "I worry about being fired, though I wasn't even hired." That type of. You relate to that? And he loves this stuff. He's a real great neshama. So going back, okay. So why am I saying expertise? Yeah, is my expertise. He looks a little like Woody Allen. His face. He's a very funny guy, very it's interesting. Okay. The reason I said expertise, because I'm trying to create an example that we can relate to. As you know, I loathe turning this into mathematical formulas. You have to find ways to hold on to this that you relate to. It's the whole point of Chassidus. So, if you're an expert in a particular area, and let's say you're teaching a class, it could be, let's say beginners. It could not necessarily beginners, but beginners would make it easier to understand. So you're giving a certain overview, certain ideas. No way you can give in a class an hour or even a course everything you've learned. I don't just mean the details. I mean the Elal Kolana, the synergetic conclusions you've come to that can only come when you learn over the years and the resonates but you're giving them a taste of it. And so being an expert, whatever you're saying is accurate. There's no distortions. But you're giving a taste of whatever that subject matter is. Let's say an introduction to Chassidus, someone who's never learned Chassidus. Introduction to medicine, introduction to physics. So you're giving them an idea. The idea is a full concept. It's a bona fide, legitimate idea. But the Makabel is receiving, as he says, let's just use the words, he's receiving the Seichel. He's not able to penetrate to reach the ultimate purpose. Like, what does this wisdom really teach us? What's the summary of all of Chassidus? What's the punchline, so to speak? And also the Mashpia is not giving him all that depth. He's giving him an overview, Chachenius. So when the student asks a question in this type of class, right, what the question is going to be something based on what was taught. Not going to be necessarily, it's only b'chachenius inyan. And the Mashpia is going to answer him what he needs to hear right now. He's not going to say to him, look, your question brings up a whole bunch of things, and let's now go into the depth of it. He's going to give him an answer that's satisfactory for now, and then there's a whole other dimension. It's like an answer that is a good answer, it's a fine answer for now, but one day when he will come to really understand the premise of the Inyan, he'll realize there's a far deeper answer, far bigger picture. That's why very often, I mean, I've been what's the word for it? I've been guilty of this more than once. You have to really learn how to discipline yourself. Sometimes people ask me a question about something in my classes or whatever, and I always lean toward going to the root and not giving them a superficial answer. I don't mean a false answer, but like a superficial one, I mean, and I always say, like people ask me, what's this thing with the Torah about women and men? Lo yasani isha, women can't have aliyahs, they can't be eidas, there's the whole list, there's a whole list. So there's one way to answer, you give them an answer to the immediate question. I never like to go there, because I know that every answer I'm going to give, there's going to be 1,000 other questions. So I say, to answer this, we got to go to a whole bunch of introductions. Like that type of thing. That's going deeper into it, which sometimes people are not ready for that yet. So it's a kunz. How do you give an answer that's not really yet the complete answer? Because there's some controversial questions, especially that you really need to go to the tachlis of the inyan to really answer properly. And then when you understand it, it'll answer automatically hundreds of questions. I mean, you understand what I'm saying. But there is definitely two approaches. There's a way to answer a question without necessarily giving you the whole foundation. Now you know the foundation, all questions are automatically answered. The women and men, I tend not to go there. It's because it's too, to me, I don't want to give a pat answer that will right away just bring up another question. Because I also don't want to patronize them, give them a cute answer. When it comes to controversial things, for me, I always lean towards saying this needs much more discussion. I'll give you a few pointers. And I don't mind people saying that I'm being evasive, because I know it's topics that I don't like band-aid answers. To me, I'm not, any question that's controversial topics, you have to go back to core subject matter.
I always think to them that they don't need it.
Okay, and they accept this answer.
Sometimes.
Well,
I don't feel on the Upper West Side or Manhattan.
I find most intelligent women hate this answer. They see it as patronizing. They say, yeah, we're higher than it all, right? I've had that before I even say it. People say, so you're going to tell me now we're higher than it all?
That's right.
Okay.
In certain ways.
Okay, so then in other words, that's why you're like a servant. So lo yasani isha, lo yasani goy, lo yasani eved. They're all higher than it all. Is that the next line?
Oh, yes.
So you see, it gets more complicated if you really get into it. The point I'm trying to make is that I just want to give an example how you can deal with something. We're dealing with a subject right now, and then there's dealing with it on a more fundamental level. Look, a lot of times a beginner student will ask a question that's a key question and forces you to go deeper. But you can't teach the whole Torah standing on one foot. You have to answer what you're able to, and then add that there's more to the subject, and we'll address it further as we go. That's this. Omnam yichud pnimi hu. However, in contrast, the inner yichud, hu shamakabel kashashemei dover mirabai, that the recipient, when he hears something from his teacher, in yonihu l'shmei nekudas tamtzis eir hashefa, v'tachlis kavanas harav ba'inyan hazeh. His interest here, in yonihu, is to hear not just the idea that was stated, but to really perceive, to understand the Kudas Tamtzis, the bottom, this real summary of the Eir HaShefa, of the transmitted energy, the Tachlis Kavanos, and the ultimate purpose of the teacher in this subject matter. Like we said before about
Kavanos here, I don't think means purpose. Kavana means
no, Kavana not purpose of existence. Kavana purpose of the teacher's Kavana of the Seichel. Yeah. Like he said before. Look at line 4. Tachlis HaKavana v'tamtzis hamusik. Yeah, Tachlis Kavana of the idea. Yeah. That's what I meant by purpose. Intention. Like he said in the last chapter, remember he said about Koi Ina Shadaita de Rabbi. When you reach age 40, actually it was 2 chapters ago, right? Yeah. We said B'derech Tzara with the Kav, the Primis HaKav. So what did he say? You're getting an energy, but within it, there's Derech Tzara, there's a summary of everything. So you could either be learning the Chechenyas HaKav, which is what you're getting right now, or you could be recognizing, discerning in it, what is it really coming to bring to me? Oh, this is very interesting. I'll give a good example from the Maimarim itself. We're learning about Chochma Binah now. So remember, a while back, I said, is Chochma Binah just an example, or is it actually in the Inyan itself? So if you learn Chechenyas, you could say it's an example. It's an example to understand the structure of existence. It's an example to understand the higher Yichud. But if you really learn the Tachlis HaKavanah from Ayin Beis, you see Chochma Binah is the interface itself on a lower level. And a completely different Reichkeit, a different type of appreciation of the concepts here. When you realize the example he's giving is actually the switches themselves on a lower level. That would be an example. Now, if someone learned only the Chochma Binah part and came away in understanding what is Chochma Binah, great. They're not wrong, but they only have the so-called a segment of the idea.
partial picture.
Right. So there we go. So now we're talking the Yichud Pnimi. To come to this deeper appreciation of the kavanah, of the inner meaning, the inner purpose, the inner intention of the teacher's ideas, you need to have a tzimtzum.
It's very interesting. That should be forgotten.
Right. Okay, let's see where he's going. That he limits and constricts. Makavitz means like when a person curls up. Makavitz atzmei is shrink, shrivel. Yeah, but here he means makavitz. He means that he narrows himself, like he limits himself.
Really, he means it focuses. Okay.
Yeah. Makavitz focuses. Target. The power of his comprehension. Yeah, I know it's a little counterintuitive, but let's see where he's going. Because now, in the Hasagah Chitzenius, in the outer comprehension of it, he would not require the Kavetz Keich Hasagah Shleikim, who Basrachvus Lekabel Chitzenius Ein Levad. He didn't need that type of concentration. That's a good word, concentration. That's what I would say, concentration. So Tzimtzum here is from the like. In other words, when you hear, like if you're a smart person, you hear somebody say something, how much do you really need to apply yourself? Total concentration. You don't need to be mitzvah. You could be distracted a bit. Not that it's great, but you could hear something else, be distracted, and you pick up more or less because the chetzein says seichel. He's bisachus means he's everywhere. It doesn't mean bisachus here breitkeit. He means here it's like he's expansive to receive only the external dimension of it. But if he wants to get the real deeper meaning, he misses one letter, one word, he can miss the whole point. If he wants to get the real Hasaga Primis behechlich, it behooves him. He has to. You'd say samtzim v'yikavitz kol keich hasagosei, that he mitzamtzim, he concentrates and focuses and narrows all his power of comprehension. Sheti bli hispashtus reichav hasaga klal uklal. Oh man, this sounds like Chazara big time. What we did. It's like shutting down the processor almost.
Yeah.
That's really what he's saying here. It was interesting how he used it. He has to completely believe. In other words, he can't be thinking about other things at all. That's the point. The external idea, you can be thinking other things, and it fits in. Here, you really want to get to the bottom of it. You have to completely take your mind, get rid of all other ideas. This sounds familiar, and completely. I'm glad that Rabbi Rashab is saying it, not me. Has different authority. He brings through. She said, without any expansion and reichav, expansion at all. He's the ultimate narrowness or boundaried or confined, constricted. I know this is confusing because usually we hear Meitzer, Tzimtzum, you're talking about tzaras, anxiety, like that, being constricted. But this is Meitzer Mitzrayim Mi. That's he's going back to Meitzer Mi and Meitzer Yam. Remember, he's talking here Mitzrayim of Gedusha. That's what he's leading to. Clearly Meitzer. She needs Tachlis HaMeitzer Tzimtzum Shenish Rak Etzem Nekudis Klei HaSoga Shalei. That the only thing that remains is the container to receive the idea, comprehension. It's not. In other words, it's not just stretching yourself out and let me hear what you got to say.
Put your mind wander.
It's like this type of thing. Okay, yeah, tell me what you're thinking. It's like this. If I could put it in if I could do a theatrical version of it, it's like right.
Not letting
okay, like really zeroing in, and I just want to hear exactly what is being said here, instead of a type of okay, give it to me. Yeah, this is really what we did. That is wow, amazing, concentrating exactly what was said, without any distractions, without anything else coming in the way.
Relating it to this or that, just
yeah. If you want to get to the bottom of it,
without thinking prior thing.
Right.
Before.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what you've been telling us for the last.
Exactly. Okay, good. We got to remember which chapter. From now on, I'm not going to say it anymore. I'm just going to say refer to chapter 139. Remember that 139.
139.
He did mention
Listen,
something like this.
you go check out 139. Get back to me after you read it.
You said something like this before.
Huh?
You said something like this before. Too.
Not so open.
Not directly like this. No, we would have noticed because it's very okay. I know. Where do you think I got it from? You think it's my ideas? I don't say anything of my own. I try to understand what it says here. Look, but for me, the most biggest chus is to understand this, not to understand myself.
When you first got into that business, did they tell you that this?
It wasn't a very big profitable business, just for the record.
When you first got that job, did they
I mean, it was better than profits. That I can tell you.
This, or did you just
No. If you don't know this, you're not even in the first base.
So they wouldn't even think of it.
First of all, nobody invites you in. You don't have to. There's no membership dues, and there's no call. You either know how to do it or you don't know how to do it. It's like running a marathon. You can try to run and it won't go.
Where did you learn this from?
It came first with desire. I really wanted to do it. First of all, it's really valuing the Rebbe's words and recognizing that you're not going to hear it again. Shabbos and Yontif, this is it. You don't remember it, it's over with. It'll never be documented. So those are compelling elements. You have to really love the idea. If I didn't care about the idea, I wouldn't do it. Why would you concentrate like that? You have to really be dedicated to it and really feel that it's worthy of such effort.
If you had a shir in Zal before that, did you do something like this too?
If I wanted to, I could turn it on whenever I want. That I know how to do it.
Before you even...
No, not necessarily, because I didn't respect the teachers. Here and there, I was lazy. No, I went to yeshiva, and I got away with, I was able to. It came to test day, we crammed. You figure it out, like we all do. I wasn't a masmid type. I don't have the Kabbalah cell just to sit on the bench to learn, just to learn. So it had to be something passionate. For me, it's all connected to passion. Without the passion, there's nothing to talk about. Even if you have skills. Look at people with skills without passion, what happens to it? It's squandered. What do you do with it? There's no catalyst, there's nothing to ignite you. To me, that was a major thing. It's not don't trust me, that's not enough. You can have passion and not have skill. In my case, I was very intrigued by the process. I definitely was in the stage as a bocher really wanting to absorb. And then I did what it took, and it became very clear to me. Now I speak about it, I can turn it into science. I didn't have it figured out. I just did what had to be done. It was just natural. I remember standing. It was critical not to allow yourself to get distracted. That's for sure. I don't just mean by flies, by ideas. You could not let yourself take the idea and say, "Oh, wow, that's great. That answers all my questions about God and so on." That was suicide, literally. The more you appreciated what the Rebbe was saying, the worse it was for memory. I've said this here already. Because the processing is about you. Absorbing is about the idea. As soon as you're processing it, I'm involved. And if I'm involved, you're not hearing the teacher anymore. At least not 100%, for sure not. I can tell you right now, I can see in the eyes when I speak to people, I see right away what percentage, what the attention you have. People don't know how to listen. It's not always because the speaker is good or not good. Obviously, if you're a good speaker, you're engaging, you can get people more attention than another person. But people are fundamentally not trained to listen properly. Number one, they don't have this passion to the idea. Why should they? I'm not a Rebbe. I'm not just saying me. Why would they listen to with such type of thing? That's number one. Number two, no one ever taught them. No one ever taught them. I told you, I can give a workshop. I could train people in one workshop to improve their memories 20% at least. Guaranteed.
When are you having this workshop?
I could do it anytime.
Doing it right now.
No, he's not.
No, I'm doing it now. I've given some pointers here.
Yeah.
The challenge is, the hardest thing you're going to find is, the smarter you are, the harder it is. Because the smart people are the ones that have so many ideas.
You said you told them to read a page and then the smarter people...
Exactly. Reading a page and closing the book and trying to write down what you read, is a good beginning. I've never heard this exercise I've suggested. If you want to do what he just said here, I'll give you right now an exercise and try it out. I've done this. I tell people, here's the exercise. This is a workshop right here, in a 2-minute workshop. You don't have to do it right now. Do it on your own time. You don't need a supervisor. That's how brilliant it is. It's like obvious, but you see, suddenly you'll realize something about yourself that you don't have no clue. Because you have no clue are you a good listener? Do you know? You don't even know. How good of a listener are you? A person can't judge themselves. You have to ask people that you should be listening to. You ask your wife how good of a listener you are, or people, you can't judge yourself. People say to me, I'm a good listener, I right away smile. I'm like, how do you really know that? Like, who established that? You got a PhD in listening? So here's the test. Here's a simple workshop. Take any book you like, any sefer, anything. It doesn't matter. It can be Moby Dick, Lahav L'Chassidus, you name it. Something you read 1,000,000 times, something you think you know by heart. Better probably something that you don't really know by heart, literally, but almost anything. Read one page and read it as many times as you like, from beginning to end. It's again not quantity, but it's a page. I don't mean 3 lines. A page. The goal is that you're going to close the book and you're going to write on a piece of paper what you just read. It doesn't have to be word for word. I'm not talking about memorizing words. I'm not talking about like Tanya Bal Peh. I'm talking about the ideas. What did you read? No chidushim. We're not just asking. Convey what you read. And you can, as I said, you can spend your whole day reading it. So what happens is, and I've tried this. Before we start, I always say to people, so what do you think percentage-wise you're going to capture? So everyone says 60 to 80%. Everybody. No one says 100. 60 to 80 is a common... Yeah, 60, 80. Most people say. Yeah, 60 to 80%. People answer. They say. What happens actually? no one even reaches 60. They don't even reach 40 maybe. Listen a second. The smarter the person, the faster they read it, and the right away they already finished the exercise, because they're so overconfident. The smarter they are, the less they remember, the less they convey. And you can compare. You open the page and you read. Okay, let's see what you wrote, what it says. And above all, the smarter they are, the more things they write that actually contradict what it says. They write what they understood. Because they didn't read it long enough to really see what it says. They right away say, oh, I got it. Because they're usually relying on something they got already in the past. That's what they're doing. So they actually distort what it says. And it's quite humbling. I've seen this in a room with people, pretty smart people. And they're very, very, very humiliated because others read it. We have others read it, and they say, 1 second, I wrote that. And then they first try to force it and say, no, that's what it really means. But it becomes obvious. It doesn't really mean it. You just didn't read it properly. Okay. So then really they have to acknowledge is that I'm smarter than the author. Why do I have to write what he's writing? I'm writing what I'm writing. So then the whole exercise has been defeated. You see what I'm saying? That's what happened. When you come to discover that it has a lot to do with your ego and overconfidence, has nothing to do with intelligence. It has to do with your bittul. The humility of being able to, like Hillel. Why was Hillel the psak like Hillel? Because he preceded Shammai's words before his own. What does that mean? They simply said Shammai before his own. It meant that he respected Shammai's ideas that were contradictory to his own and repeated them word for word before he presented his own ideas. When you learn, it's an interesting Gemara, right? What's the accomplishment to repeat someone before me? So he's respectful. He had the humility to present Shammai's case first, and not in a weak way. Sometimes you present the other guy's case and you build into it all kinds of things. And I have to say is far greater than that. That's not what he did. He presented Shammai's case as good as Shammai would present it, and then he came to his own. That requires more than just intelligence. That's integrity. And integrity is the name of the game when it comes to the real understanding of something. It's not about you. But we are ego people, that's the fact, and our minds are part of our egos. What I just said right now is enlightening, right? Because you don't ever think of it. It's counterintuitive to think of memory in terms of bittul. You think of memory as in terms of intellect, of brain power, right? You'll always see brain power. Let's build your brain power. It's not brain power, it's the opposite. And that's what builds your brain power. So the ability to process has to be shut down as much as possible to absorb. And the second time around, by the way, everyone does it, it goes up from 40% to 60%. Because they right away, their attitude is different. They're not reading it now with patience, a little more humility. The overconfidence is gone. That's what changes. Now, to get from 60 to higher, that takes a little more, you need to really want to do it. But you could train people. This is not something you can't train people. I'm not saying, obviously, not everyone's going to have the ability to listen to 5 hours of Brengen and repeat it. But you can definitely train people to get a lot better than they are. And it's in everything. It's not just related to learning. It's related to relationships. When you hear people speak to you, do you really hear them? Or how much do you hear really? And how much is through your filter? And if they say something you really don't like, how much of it do you block out before it doesn't even enter your brain? Which means how you give advice, how you communicate. Now some people are forgiving, and then some people overlook it, in relation, let's say in marriage. Women will say men just don't get it, and that's it. And they just focus on whatever they think is their priorities. And men think women don't get it, whatever it is. There's a lot. This is a critical element in relationships and everything. Obviously in Avodah for sure. I say it always. Why do I say it when we learn? Not because I'm saying it, because you are all have the bad habits that I also had once. I probably still have elements of it. I try not to, For me, it comes down to if I apply myself, I can do it. Apply myself is not always what I want to do. Like sometimes someone says something to me and they say so, and I honestly didn't, I was daydreaming. So I play cutely I say, can you rephrase what you said? They say, oh, you didn't really hear it, did you? Rephrasing is just a way of saying I didn't. I was sleeping. And they say, I heard you're able to repeat 5 hours of the Rebbe's Farbrengens. You can't repeat 5 words, 5 minutes of mine. So I don't want to break it on them that I don't see any history unfolding in what they're saying. So I didn't apply myself that way. It's great. Listen, I don't feel arrogant about it. I feel very empowered that I'm able to turn it on when I have to, and I do. I remember My father passed away, so Eli Wiesel came to the funeral. So though we didn't do any haspedim, but he was there, so I asked him to say a few words. So, no one recorded it or anything. So we wanted to publish what he wrote. And we were all we were sitting with Kriya and everything. And afterwards I was able to repeat it word for word because I turned it on. And afterwards I was able to, and I remember he said, "How did you know what I said? There was no recording." I was able to do it. But what he said was easy. Because what did he say? Right? He didn't say any profound things. I mean, we had the different chayzim were different. Some people, they were very different. Rabbi Yael, actually, his real strength is understanding the Rebbe. He knew the Rebbe's style very well, which sometimes, as he told me, worked against him, because sometimes he would think the Rebbe was saying something that he had already said, so he right away. And that ability to have like a youthful type of, like I had a clean slate. I didn't know the Rebbe's ideas yet, so I just heard them at face value, which was helpful because he heard them already with a colored lens, and we would argue about these things. There were times that he didn't realize certain things the Rebbe said, not because his mind was already shaped about that idea. It's very hard as you get older. When your mind is shaped, it gets more difficult as you get older because your hard drive is no longer empty. Besides all the shtusim, but even your smart stuff, you already have your perspective on things. It's hard to challenge that. The keys when a person is young. If I had any say, I would institute this, what I've described now, into every school and every class and everywhere. It would change completely how people learn, how people appreciate, how people challenge even. Because oddly, when you absorb well, then when you process far better than when you process while you're absorbing. Because if you absorb it, you know, okay, I read what it says, now I can really challenge it, because now I know what he said, now I can bring my strengths and say, okay, I read something else that contradicts this. Most people will find a contradiction, you'll see it's not real contradiction, because they didn't really read it. So they just make their own little contradiction. But when you read it, when you absorb well, you then can process 100 times better. Because you really heard the idea. It's like, if I heard your argument, that disagrees with me, and I really heard it, I can give you a far better argument than if I didn't really hear it, because then I'm not really responding to you. Then I'm just, playing around. I mean, so it creates a far deeper. I'm elaborating because this is literally what he's saying here. To get the etzem kavonas harav.
That's why it says forgetfulness is from the Sitra.
For sure.
I'm trying to think about that.
Ein shikha tachas kisik v'decha. Forgetfulness, shikha is the gematria of what? There's a gematria for shikha. What is shikha? 328, 328, 333. It's like shelag. There's some gematria for shikha, but yeah, absolutely. You see, there's total retention in Kedusha because there's no turbulence, there's no distractions, there's nothing that should. Why shouldn't you be receiving? Why shouldn't a keli completely receive the and that enters in it? What's blocking it? It's only if the keli has some other agenda, like a yesh or I have somewhere to go, But a true keli is a complete receptacle for what's entering it. To be a keli like that for us is not easy. Children are, by the way, pure kelim. Doesn't matter. It may be hard to get their attention, but when you do, they're dry sponge. That's why a child you can teach. Try teaching a 20-year-old ABC. Literally A, B, C. Who's going to have patience for this? He's busy with all kinds of things. Almost impossible. I can't even imagine if we weren't taught Aleph Beis when we were at that age. It would be almost impossibility. I mean, some people pick up languages, but I'm talking about Aleph Beis, basic ABC. Am I wrong? There's a whole thing that's like perfect. Children have those sponge-like minds that just absorb information that because they're not processing. They don't process. Children don't know how to process.
It's new for them. Everything's new for
Huh?
them. Everything is new for them.
Yeah, it's like a clean. Yeah, it's exactly. It's a dry, but they have no ideas to start anything. It's not like, oh, you said this, but yesterday you said that. There's none of that. It's just whatever it is, it is.
We have to defragment our hard drive.
That's why by the Rebbe, that's why you surround the child with psukim. That's why the early years you want them to pure kedusha, because what they absorb then is the foundation. Everything's shaped from then. You start contaminating a child's mind early on. It's like one of the worst things you could possibly do. Bad adults is also bad, but adults already, they're already contaminated, so to speak. But a child's mind is like, really think of it like, here God gives you a clean parchment, What are you going to do with it? That's the way it looks. That's the way you have to look at it. What are you going to put on it? And whatever the child experiences or sees or reads or hears, and parents, every tantrum, I'm not just talking about learning, how you behave, your tantrums, your anger, your personality. Yeah.
You have to bubbly.
Now, for me, the more you learn it, the more you see it. I mean, to me, I'm always disturbed when someone yells at a child. I'm always disturbed by it, even if the child deserves it. Because always for me it's like okay, so you introduce now a yell into the child's brain. You know, I understand discipline. Don't get me wrong, but I would trust far more children's ethics than adults, even though we're the ones that are disciplining. But that's another discussion. Okay, so here we go. That's the kibbutz. Fine. So the more you want to go deeper, the more focus you need, the more concentration, and to put away, those words are the key.
He's also
Ramesh, you're going to remember those words.
It's also etzem nekudas kli hasaga. Just the kli has to be there.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Cleaning out the whole keli, that it should be. That's good. Yeah. Where was that? Yeah, Shatia Bli. It's called Kol. Kol kech Shatia Bli is etzem nekudas klei hasag. Yeah, very good.
Exactly what you said.
It remains only the core nekudas klei hasag shaleh. Just remains a keli without any. Oh man, is this such a lesson in life? How many conversations do you see people have, and they don't have patience to hear the other person out, and they're right away, you know. I also have that. Sometimes in the passionate moment, you can't let someone else finish the sentence. But it's definitely not. Besides respect, it's not truly a good, intelligent process. You have to be able to have that type of. That's why I don't like debates. Debates to me are all about ego, winning, entertainment, not about clarity. Okay. So when a person has this type of tzimtzum and kibbutz, this concentration, then and therefore also the mashpia transmits them the depth and the internal, soul of the seichel. Now we're going the other way around. Remember before, he said three things he said before in Chitzenius HaSeichel. The Makabel is only hearing Chitzenius, not the real inner intention. The Mashpia is only conveying Chitzenius. When there's a question, the question is about Chitzenius, and the answer is also a superficial one. In other words, addressing the immediate issue, not... So here's what I'm saying. Now that the Makabel is in a state of kibbutz, concentration, and really receiving the core. So the teacher, mashpia, is mashpia the emek. And now it goes back to what happens now when there's a question. He's contrasting it. And then now, when there's makabel, the recipient asks him a question, because now, and all this is in the pnimius of the inyan, the mashpia is not going to just give him an answer, whatever comes to him, first glance, type of prerequisite. What's the word for it? Precursor, not precursory. Yes, ostensible. What do you say, Ashkaf? Ostensible, right? Like an immediate first glance type of response, but muskulishin, whatever comes to him. Rather, he will make an effort to reveal and to bring out from the depths and the concealment of the source of seichel to explain this. Because we're no longer dealing with just a, what's the word when you say surface? Is it not precursory? Huh? Surface. Precursory? Cursory. Cursory is a word, right. A cursory response, a cursory understanding. Because now he's going, since the student is not really concentrating and really going into it, so the response is also going to be that way. This I can tell you many times with the Rebbe, when we would ask a question, we sometimes got an answer that was like level 1, based on our type of question, when it was a shallow question. And then there were times the Rebbe would really give a very fundamental answer when we really hit the point. That I remember vividly. I remember even once the Rebbe writing, wasn't to me. Someone else asked the question, and the Rebbe wrote, how many minutes did you think about this question before you wrote it to me? Because he realized that you didn't really think it through. It's like a quick contradiction, but you gave it a little more thought, and the answers would be very commensurate.
Even in the Chitzonis?
Yeah, there were times. No, there were times that a question was asked more like a superficial question. The Rebbe gave a superficial answer.
That would mean the Chitzonis.
Or sometimes he would say it superficial. He'd say, how long did you think about it?
We're talking about a Chitzonius question at this point, right?
No, now he's talking about Pnimis.
Oh.
Pnimis. When it's coming from Pnimis, then the teacher will not just give you whatever comes to him first, like a quick answer. He will go and make an effort to get to the depth of the Mokra Seichel. The meitzers are all over the place. Okay, and this too, when the mashpia does that, when he goes in depth, it also comes to him in a form of meitzer. The kol emek bo b'chinas meitzer dafka, because all depth, it's a rule, comes through a meitzer, it's actually boundaries, or I would say concentrated boundaries, is the way I would define it. Because you want to get to depth, you have to dig in. To dig in requires a type of focus. If not, it's just scattered. It's like laser energy, basically. Laser energy is concentrated as opposed to scattered energy. Yeah, but I didn't want to use that because that means he's not trying to say anxiety here.
No, but it's from the depths.
Yeah. But Meitzah sometimes could be also a negative way. From my pain or my anxiety or from my anguish.
It means coming from the depths.
Yeah, but also anguish. Meitzah sometimes is anguish. But here he's talking Meitzer. So here too comes from a Meitzer because all depth comes from Meitzer. That's what he's saying here. Like the depths of the springs, the internal springs of the earth. Hamayan. Shnevei tipin. That flow, not like a river. Tipin, drop by drop. They just come out drop by drop. But they come from the depths of the earth. So basically, the Emek HaMayim, where you dig deep, and you find a well. So wells are not gushing wells; they dripping wells. The truth is, some springs are gushing, I guess, but they're not like rivers for sure. They're not like oceans and rivers.
Here means Emek HaMayim. You haven't
dug it into
it yet. If you dig into it, it will come gushing out.
Yeah. While it's still there.
Inside, yeah,
the Emek HaMayim, as it's deep within. Okay.
There's level of Cyrus, little by little.
Yeah. And this is the meaning, that the words of wise people, benachas nishmaim, are heard with nachas, with calm, pleasant. Would you say pleasant?
Thoughtful.
Not thoughtful. No. Nachas is more. But nachas means not nachas means peaceful, calm, pleasant. Not aggressive, not loud, not benachas. Chacham speaks with certain edelkeit. Not hasty. Nachas is just slow. You don't mean slow. Nachas is measured and balanced. Measured and balanced is also a good word. That's it. He says, he doesn't rush to say whatever came to him first in his mind. Rather, on the contrary, he restrains, and controls, or withdraws, or restrains himself, not to speak at first glance, but to draw out from the depths of the wisdom and from the inner dimension of the inyan. Really nice, very beautiful piece here about how to think healthily. Think healthy.
And Makabel and Mashpia have very similar processes.
Yeah. And they are,
one elicits from the other, right?
Yeah. I wish we could just go on like this. Now we have to go back to the Kabbalah. Okay. Fine. Well, we dig in. This is the yichud pnimi. This is the internal yichud. This is the true unity between a mashpia and a makabel. You see the interface here at work? All this is interface because it's how they connect. Right. Oh, this is good. The Rebbe. I remember the few times we used to write to the Rebbe, we got it. The Rebbe would write back, you could see right away that he saw we got it, and he would answer completely differently. When you would get it, when you would go, when you dug deep into something, you always got solid responses, like real comprehensive, very fundamental. So this is the Yichud Pnimi of Mashpia Makabel, of a teacher and a transmitter and a recipient. Sheba b'meitzer b'b'chinas nekuda dafke, that comes b'meitzer, which means it comes in a very concentrated, focused way, in a nekuda, in a germ, a point. Hein b'mashpia, both in the mashpia, in the transmitter, and hein b'makabel, and also in the both in the transmitter and the recipient. And from this meitzer, from this concentration, from this boundary, this measured, this focused approach, afterwards he comes to merchav b'yeser. Remember I said, if you absorb well, you will process well. So now you come merchav b'yeser to an increased expansiveness. Not just, in other words, the narrowness is actually bringing you to a far greater expansive place. Because through grasping the tamtzis nekudasin, because he now got the core central idea, he now afterwards can go and expand on the idea increasingly, and the depth b'yeser, and appreciate its depth increasingly. So he's talking here, there's erech, rechev, and emek. Right? So he's speaking here, rechev and emek, expanding it, and emek is in depth. And it all starts with a nekuda. But it's not a nekuda, remember, it's a germ, it's a seed. You got the seed, you got the core idea. Because you focused in, this is the core idea. I'm going to give you an example for this. The Ragachover, I don't know if you ever studied the Ragachover, the Rebbe brings him a lot. He's a real unsung hero, so to speak. One of these brilliant minds. He revolutionized the way you learn Torah, really. And the Rebbe obviously grasped on that and used him a lot. Because also, the Ragachover, even though Ragachover grew up a Chassidus, he came from Chabad home, but like he said, what should I do? The Rebbe Tzaddik gave me a blessing for Nigla, not for Chassidus. So his mind was basically Nigla. But his approach to Nigla is very Chassidus, as I'll explain in a moment. So one of the things that he does that really, someone asked me to speak once about, and I said, it's not so much he's a gun and he knew all the Gemaras and knew Bucky like no one, literally unbelievable. You tell him a Gemara, he'll tell you every similar. But what he really did, and he wrote it in very cryptic terms. You need to have Menachem Kasher, Mefanech Tvens, they have to decipher him essentially because it's all very brief. Ayin, and he'll just bring a bunch of Gemaras, compare them, say 3 words, and that's that. But what he did, what his brilliance was, he was able to strip halachas, laws, from their application and get to the core theory. Like, what's the theory behind this halacha? Before any application, the theories are completely divorced from the application. And once you get to the theory, he was able to find similarities through the theory to halachas you would never in your life connect. It's tremendous. No, he was, I'll give you an example. Yeah. I'll give you an example. There's a Shaila Shabbos, laws of Shabbos. If God forbid someone's Machal Shabbos, is Shabbos over for him? Or you have to continue keeping it.
Or a fast day.
Huh?
You ate in a fast day.
Oh, you ate in a fast day. Similar, yeah. So what's the argument? What's the issue here? So there's a lot of different theories on the issue. He says it's the question of time. Is Shabbos a one entity called 24-hour period called Shabbos? And therefore, if you puncture it, it's gone. Kedushas, huh?
Blown away.
Yeah. Or is time pieces, particles? So every moment is Mekudesh anu. So the fact that a moment before you're Mechal, God forbid, doesn't mean the next moment is not. Look at Tzvir Semer, for example. Tzvir Semer is a combination. On one hand, it's one entity. On the other hand, which is why if you miss a day, you can't make a blessing the next day. On the other hand, day 30 is not day 29. But based on this concept of time, he applies it to all kinds of areas where he brings halachas that have nothing to do with Shabbos, that deal with this issue. Is time a body of time, or is it a component? Just to give you an example. So what happens is that when you really get to the core of an idea, you besides you have a whole different appreciation, your core of idea allows you to expand it now into applications that are far, far outside of the original paradigm. So, for example, this whole idea with time can now be applied to physics, for example. No learning Hilchos Shabbos about this would ever apply it to physics, because the halachic structure limits it from really going there. But when you strip it from that, you get to the core, the real core essence of the idea. The ability then to let's put it this way, enclose it in different types of garments becomes endless. You can apply it to so many different areas in life. This is very, very Chassidus. Because Chassidus does is abstracts an idea into its pure form, and then you could apply it to many different situations in life. It has that ability to go there. I'm just giving an example of what he's saying. I'm not saying this is exclusively what he's saying here, but it's a good example, I think, for how once you have that meitzar and concentration, you got to the core, the pnimius, then comes the merchav b'yeser and the emek ha'inyan b'yeser. Not exactly these words, but it's the same idea, that there's an expansiveness that comes as a result of that type of concentrated idea. So if you really get it, you can put it this way: people who really get ideas can find all kinds of metaphors that no one else would find. Why? Not because they're smart and they come up with a creative with metaphor, because they have the idea so clear that they immediately can see it in all kinds of so-called foreign metaphors. You know, you read Richard Feynman, physicist, brilliant in this. He gives such simple metaphors for the most complex quantum theories. Like, he'll give metaphors from life, and you see right away the guy really gets it, because his metaphors are so simple, deceptively simple, because he got it, so he's able to find it in simple, daily, mundane matters.
Who's this guy? Feynman.
He's a Jewish guy, Richard Feynman. He's not alive. He's brilliant lectures. You could find him online. He's very, very good. When you want to take about a master teacher.
Yeah, that's what you did.
Huh? No, he.
When you studied quantum mechanics.
Oh, yeah, he's one person I heard. No, I mean he's really. I'm no master in quantum mechanics. I studied. I read it. Yeah, he's definitely good. Very, very up there. There's others. There's a lot of those mystics. They're mystical ones that have found quantum mechanics, and they find it with mysticism. A lot of the parallels. Yeah, but he's very good. He's the one that said about the expanding universe. He used to believe in God until he came to realize there's so much waste of space. The universe is too large. There's no purpose in it. So he said, by him, the largeness of the universe, the vastness of the universe, actually made him stop questioning that there's a God. Why would God waste so much space? So we talked about this. The answer is actually when you learn Chassidus, because the actual vastness of it that we don't understand is giving us a taste of God's vastness. That's what Chassidus would say, like, the Ein Sof of Elokus.
Yeah.
But he didn't learn Chassidus. A lot of these guys, no doubt if they really got Chassidus, they'd be on a different level. Science would be on a different level. I have no dashayla about it. Because they have mind, you could see the mind. Einstein, you start reading some stuff, it's literally, this is like mind-bending ideas. It's so sad that these Jews didn't have the exposure to that. It would have been, oh man, that would be something. But we still can do it, I assume. Why not? There are brilliant minds today. It's just that nobody knows about this. Nobody even realizes the power of this. Just challenging how you think. And
There are brilliant minds at the same level like these guys?
Listen, I'm sure, yeah, there are. Of course there are. I mean, there's every generation brilliant minds. Einstein was also the right time, the right place. If he'd lived today, I don't know if he'd come up with a theory of relativity. There's always there's always brilliant minds. I'm not getting now into their ethics, but minds, yeah, I mean.
Okay.
People give real thought. They give real thought to a system, and they can challenge the system and change its rules. I mean, it's rare. You don't have you have a handful, but you have them. That's the people we should be engaging. What can I tell you? We don't engage people like that, then we're mediocre. Pardon the insult.
Did this whole thing about closing your mind off have to do with, like, at the same time with Golos Mitzrayim has the same type of thing?
He's in Kedusha. It's Kedusha. This is Mitzrayim of Kedusha. Yeah, that's what he's getting to. But in Kedusha. Mitzrayim of Kedusha, not Klippa.
Yeah, but in a way, the same process happened here. In order to get to that level, we had to be through this.
Yeah. In a chanami.
Mitzorim the klipa also in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, all the way down.
V'hainu shegama emek bol yedei merchev b'srachvus gdela b'hasaga. This means that also the depth comes, also that depth that you reached in the Nakuda, in the first step, comes into an expansion, a great expansion in your comprehension. What hanal? Which Perek Hanal? B'tamola Perek Hanal. Where's the Perek? Which Perek is he talking? Probably Mem Beis.
It's in the bottom.
No, that's not on this.
Not this one?
No, that's further. No. Perek Hanal must be Perek Mem Beis. Because that's what he brought before, right? Is that Mem Beis? It says that in Mem Beis? That's the last Perek I remember him mentioning. Interesting. It's like 2 pages ago. Huh?
Can it be just the previous paragraph?
Perek Hanal, Haniska Le'il? No. Would be Perek HaKodim. Perek Hanal? No. First of all, it doesn't say this in the previous Perek.
Could be Mem Beis.
It probably means Mem Beis. It's just interesting. Hanal is going back literally to by the Rebbe Rashab. It's just yesterday. By us, it's like another world. Okay. For who inyan Mitzias Mitzrayim? There we go. And this is the inyan of Yitzias Mitzrayim, leaving Mitzrayim. Shemin hameitzer dafke nasach hakacha yitzim min hameitzer b'srachvus gdela b'yeser. That from explicitly through the meitzer, through this concentration, through this narrowness, afterwards comes the yitzim min hameitzer. He leaves this concentrated place, b'srachvus gdela b'yeser, in a increasingly greater expansion. So it's like, as a matter of fact, we know that. Like you make a dam, you concentrate the flow, then afterwards, when it breaks through with far more force. Right. Interessant. Ulamaylahu inyan v'chochem bebina. What is this Lamaila? This answers a question I think you asked about where's the Binah and Chochma and so on. This Lamaila, what is this Lamaila? This is the inyan of Chochem bebina. That in Binah there's a level of Chochma. Shezeh b'chinas nekuda primis de Binah, shemekabel b'chinas primis nekuda de Chochma. So there's an expression called Haven b'Chochma, which he's going to say in a minute, that there's Binah within Chochma, and there's Chochem bebina. So he's introducing a new thing he hasn't said till now. Till now we speak in Nekuda Behechla, that we have the Nekuda of Chochma is in the chamber called Binah. I haven't got the door yet. Now he's saying, what is... Oh, it's open. Yeah. Chochma bebina. No problem. Chochma bebina. Yeah. Now that means the Nekuda Pnim is the Binah. So Chochem b'Binah means that the Nekuda Primis in Binah, which is already comprehension, receives from the inner Nekuda of Chochma, which is the resonance that he spoke about, which is the Emek, the depth. Seemingly, he doesn't say that specifically, but I'm just combining this in the last chapter because that's where he said Binah, that in the Nekuda. Remember in the Tamsis, in the summary you have now the resonance. He didn't connect resonance. He said here Emek. He was talking about the depth of something. He didn't say the word that he mentioned before, the Nekudas HaChochma, that the Hanochas Sichlis. Okay, we'll see. Maybe he's going to say it. V'yesh leimesh zeyin haven b'Chochma. So Chochem b'Bina. Now he says Yesh leim. This is haven b'Chochma. Understand with Bina Chochma. The Bina within Chochma. This was the Chochma within Binah, now it's the Binah within Chochma. That's for an example, the Nekudas Haskala, the Chochma, that for example, this is like the Nekudas Haskala, this is the point, the germ of the idea in Chochma, Hakshu B'chinas Paprimis Shalah. Now he does say, except it's the Primis in Chochma. Like we said before.
Is this the same?
This is Hanochas Sichlis, the resonance that we discussed earlier. One second. I'm trying to get this here. Fine. The Merchav of Bina is receiving from the Meitzer of Chochma. That's clear. That's also Havim b'Chochma. Then Nekudas is called actually B'chinas HaPrimi Shalom. Havim b'Chochma. Haven b'chochma. Hanochas sichlis. This is nachas sichlis. What does it have to do with Haven, with Binah? Let me read on. Let's see. Commission is bar le'el sham. Where's the sham? I think he may be right. Perik Hanal may be the Perik this previous Perik.
Well, that's why we spoke about the Samtus.
Yeah, right. But he didn't speak about Merchav and Emek.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I was wondering whether it's the previous Perik. Okay. And his bar is definitely earlier, right? And his bar would be lost for later, and his bar is earlier. Okay, let's read it and see where we can. Commission is bar leil sham, like we learned earlier there. She'ein ze samtus de chochma. This hanocha, this resonance is not the samtus, the sense of the conviction, the truth that's sensed in chochma that's higher than seichel. Which is the level of chochma shebechachma. V'hanocha sichlis lias sichlis has a bechinas haven bechachma.
What is chochma shebechachma? The samtus.
The samtus. So he's saying it's higher. Okay, we'll see. V'hanocha sichlis lias sichli. The resonance of seichel being seichel. That's the level of Binah in Chochma. Not Chochma. One sec. The Seichel of the Nekuda, which is the lowest level we said before, was Seichel, that's his Seidaba. And the Hanoch is the Binah, is the Haven Ba'aba. Oh, boy, man.
So you remember before we didn't understand where this is something?
I'm already discussed it earlier.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and it's not consistent with...
highest level, basically.
It's not consistent with what it says here, what we discussed, but we'll break it down. Hold on.
Is that Thompson's?
I don't know, what is that? First we have to define here terms. Which is that? Okay, I'm not concerned with Terdaba right now. I'm concerned with the whole, the Binah within Chochma. Binah within Chochma. Okay, let's continue reading, because I don't want to say anything until... let's continue reading. There's something going on here, how Binah is contributing back to Chochma, and I'm not sure what it is.
The levels that he's talking about. He's talking about Chochma Shebechachma, which is the Samtus.
The Samtus is some other level that he also shared earlier.
Then we have what?
He says that is Beis Yashrus, interestingly. Before he said it's Beis Yashrus, the Samtus, even though it's higher, it's Beis Yashrus.
Before we thought it's lower, I remember.
I also think it's lower, because we thought maybe it's referring to Shasik Rav.
Okay.
But you know what? Let's not draw conclusions. There's a lot of here. We'll process it all. We said we're going to absorb. Let's not process.
Okay.
Let's absorb what it says, and let's not try to ask questions. We have to absorb what he says, and then we'll try to maybe we'll make heads and tails. It's fine. I don't think we're going to figure it out by answering the parentheses. You have to read the whole thing. We want Emek Pnimi Sakvana. We have now a test. No, tell us the words, Moshe. What is it?
I think you should try to learn it without the parentheses and then see how the flow goes.
The parentheses is very short. We just finished the parentheses.
Yeah.
Hold on. We need to apply these words now, my friends. Hello? You have to... Can we do that? No, I'm saying we have to do that now to appreciate this. We need to do exactly what he told us to do. He gave us the secret of how to understand.
Okay.
We have to mitzamtzim. Forget about other questions. Okay. Let's just read it and see what he says, and then we'll go back and answer the shilas. So far what he said like this. What was clear till the first half of the chapter, let me just go back to have the flow, correct? We said like this, that there's chitzenius mashpia makabel, yichud, that's on a surface level. The questions are surface, the answers are surface, first glance, etc. Good. Then comes yichud pnimi. Now we're talking about a student who's applying himself to want to get, not just to understand what the teacher is saying, but to get to the depth and the core intent. There's the root of the issue. To do that, he needs a kivutz. He needs a tzimtzum. He needs a metzar. To concentrate. He can't just let it all, all ideas flow. Very focused. As a result, the teacher also responds in that way and gives him that focus, which also requires metzar for the teacher to do that. The questions, therefore, are not answered quickly and superficially. They're answered with thought and patience. Teacher doesn't just give a quick answer, like he said, b'nachas nishman, he thinks it through, he doesn't rush it, and so on. Good. This is the yichud pnimi of mashpia makabel, of the nukuda, And when you have that, then comes, if you have that type of concentrated bond between teacher and student, then you come to a merchav b'yeser, expansive state. That's Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's what he said. He said, L'mayla, this is Chochem b'Binah. I'm just reading again. I'm not explaining just what it just is. Let's get the steps clear here. Chochem b'Binah, Nakuda primis de Binah, shemekabels mechinas primis and Nakuda de Chochma. This line right here is not clear, really. What's Binah? What's Chochma? Which one is which? Is the Emek Pnimius is what? Seemingly is the Chochma. The Binah seemingly is the Merchav. That's what you would... But I'm not sure if that's the case, but let's just say what he's saying. So there's L'maylas Chochma b'Binah. V'yesh leimer, that's Haven b'Chochma. That means, Nekudas HaSchol is actually B'chinas Pnimius Shalah. B'chinas Hanochas Sichlis. It seems like this Hanochas Sichlis is connected to the Emek, the depth that we just talked about. That's what it appears, correct? Pnimius Shalah, then B'chinas Hanochas Sichlis. Essentially, Binah and Chochma are joining together, because that's the Mitzrayim, the two Mitzrayims, Meitzar Mi and Meitzar Yam. They're joining together. So then Chochma would be the Mashpia, Binah is the Makabel. Okay, Meitzar Yam joins with Meitzar Mi. The Meitzar of the Mashpia is Meitzar Yam. The Meitzar Mi is the Meitzar of the Makabel, and that's their joining. They both have gone through a Meitzar. So he's not talking now about expansion right now. He's talking about that union of depth and concentration. Okay, that was my first... so that's Chochem b'Binah. See, I thought he was going to Yisrachvus Gdei Beis. He hasn't even gone to Yisrachvus. So that's the Chochem b'Binah. Kuda Primis the Binah. Okay, then the Kuda Primis the Binah, the Makabel, is receiving Primis and Kuda Chochem, because both of them are going to the concentrated core. Very good, that's good. Okay, so you're saying that this is Havan B'Chochma, that the Nekudas is called the Chochma that we spoke about earlier, which is the inner dimension of its concentration. This is the level of that resonance.
He said there was one line that he said last chapter.
One second. He said, like we learned before, that's not his Samtus HaChochma, which is higher than Seichel. Because that's higher than Seichel. Right now he's saying his Samtus Chochma is higher than Seichel. So it's Chochma Shabbat Chochma. We're not talking a union. We're not talking about the union of Mashpia and Makabel, because you're talking, a person has a certain sense of truth, but he's not conveying it. Here we're talking about a Mashpia and Makabel that are communicating with each other, so the resonance is being conveyed. That's the distinction. Okay. Hanochas Sichli is the Sichli is B'chinas Haven B'Chochma. The seichel of the Nekuda is Yisod Abba, because if you remember, he said the Nekuda has two parts. There's the understanding of it, but you don't have yet. That's Yisod Abba. And the Hanocha is the resonance, that's the Haven. So you have three things. You have Yisod Abba is the seichel and Chochma. One second. Haven b'Chochma is the resonance, because the resonance is being communicated between student and teacher. Why? I'm not sure why that's communicated, but that's what he says. And then there's Chochma Shabbat Chochma, that's Hayisamtus, that's so-called in the domain of the Mashpia himself without communicating with Binah.
Alright, so Rabbi is the communication.
So Rabbi, he's saying, is the Chochma itself, the Seichel. Seichel of the Nekuda. He said before, there's a Hanocha, there's the resonance. It could resonate and you don't yet understand it. So there's the resonance is the Binah, and Yesod is lower.
It seems fakir, because why would the resonance be...
Because it's higher. Yesod,
it's higher, but...
It's higher than Yesod Abba.
But there's no Indian of understanding in
there is Seichel in it. There's a resonating intelligence. He said before, it's a form of Seichel. He's calling it now the Binah within Chochma. Why? I don't know. But that's what he's saying.
Okay. And Yesod Abba is lower the...
No, Yesod Abba is the Seichel. He says, Asichli Sheba Nekuda. No, he doesn't say that. The resonance is also Nishpa. The Heaven B'Chochma and Binah is Mashpia and Makabel.
It's within Binah.
This is all within Chochma, by the way.
Yeah, but in the Binah of Chochma.
I don't know what you mean by that.
It's the same process, has to go within himself.
V'hi shamislabeshes b'chinas primis Binah. Let's continue. Let's see where he's going here. And this is mislabeshes, the Hanochas Sichlis in Chochma. The resonance in Chochma manifests in the inner dimension of Binah. Shu'in v'Chochma b'Binah. Okay.
Isn't it this the highest part of Binah, of the Kelim?
He said it in the...
Yeah.
elaborating on the last couple of lines in the previous chapter.
That doesn't help Havana. Now the Havana, that's all. I understand, of course he's elaborating. Okay, let's just read again. Pashtus, I'll tell you what he's saying by Pashtus. He's saying, Chochma and Binah are Mashpiyah Makabel. We're talking now about the internal union that they have, which means there's a concentration of the student is completely focused into the Rav is completely focused into the core of the idea. This is, the Rav in this case is Chochma, Makabel is Binah. But now, more subtly, they're within each other now. They're uniting. So there's a yichud here. They're coming together. When there's the bond, when the student is focusing completely to receive the Rav, he's saying that is Haven b'Chochma. It's like the student is entering into the depth of the idea within the Chochma, and that is the resonating element. That's what he's saying. And that in turn brings Chochma into Binah. Chochma Binah, he says, is that the resonance, when it manifests in Binah into the student, that's Chochma Binah. That's what he just said here. Now I know it's abstract, but that's what he said. I don't want to go into Havana right now. I want to just try to read Pshat. But that's exactly what he just said. You can read it, you'll see. I'm just reading literally word for word. I'm not trying to apply anything. So Mailahu in Chochma Binah, that's the unity. Okay, V'yashleimer Havem b'Chochma, that's the Binah that is essentially Chochma on its own is beyond resonance even. It's Samtus. It's a type of truth, of wisdom, a flash of an idea. Then comes a level where it resonates, and you sense conviction. He says he's calling that the Binah within Chochma. In the depth, we're talking the depth now, the Yichud Pnimi, the depth. Why is it Binah within Chochma? Within Chochma itself is a Samtus. It's beyond even resonance. It's beyond relationship with something. Resonance is already something that's expressible to some subtly. And then there's Chochma within Binah, that comes into Binah and that becomes comprehended. The depth comes comprehended. Essentially what we're trying to address here is the core of the idea and its expansion and its expression. So he begins with the core, and the core, they connect on a core level, Chochma and Binah, in two ways. Binah within Chochma, Chochma within Binah, and then begins the expansion. This is technically what he's saying. But Havana of it, I want to reserve after I read it. I have to read it a few times and see where he's going. That's what he's basically, if I could say, I don't say the mathematics of it, but essentially the levels. Yeah.
It's hard to say that the Zamsus is higher precedes the Nachasichlis because
what precedes the Nachasichlis?
The Zamsus.
He says that here.
Samtus is always there.
It's hard to perceive. It's hard to say that precedes the experience of this Nachasichlis because we previously called the Zamsus is Yashvis.
That's what I asked before.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. That's why, so you should question. I told you, I don't have it fully figured out. Okay. Let's just read what he's saying, and then we got to resolve the loose strings.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what a Samtus is. Now I'm thinking a Samtus is something else. I'm thinking a Samtus is just, when you have a flash of an idea, it's like the Elokus in it. Just, that the fact that Hulavad Vein Zulose, just the sense that he's God and there's nothing else. So it has nothing to do with Seichel. It sounds to me it's almost not Seichel, the Samtus. It's Ma. Almost complete Ma. Resonance is already some type of, it's also not pure comprehension, but resonance, it resonates. You sense its meaning, etc. I don't know. I don't want to jump. It's ridiculous to speculate. We've got to learn it first. I don't want to speculate.
In other words, it's already.
Yeah, because he said that also earlier. If you look, he said it's seichel, but it's still hanocha.
He's not saying that. He's saying that.
Man, there's dissecting of this.
Like Riyah.
Riyah, yeah, exactly. It's like Riyah, which would mean it's not Shasik Rav of earlier. It's on a higher level.
It's like Shteikach It's not like that level.
Maybe. Or it's like Riyah. I think Riyah is the right word because look, to learn this properly, you have to go back to Perek Mem Beis because he refers to it specifically. Keeps referring to it. So I'm sure between that and this, we'll figure it out. But let's be patient. This doesn't have to be understood all over.
That's Riyah and it's not Sichli. It's more of a Riyah.
Right, exactly.
This is more of a Sichli.
Because there he says that Riyah is higher, and then comes Hanocha, and then comes the Seichel.
There's Perek Mem Beis.
Perek Mem Beis is where he refers to Riyah. I think that's probably what Isamtus is. And for some reason, that Isamtus is Yashvas, even though it's the highest level, because it's like you saw it yourself.
Right.
So in a strange way, Isamtus starts with that, because it's just it's clarity. It's a clarity. Doesn't mean you understand it. It's like you can't deny. You don't have to understand something you see, but Isyashvus it is.
You're comfortable with it.
It's a different meaning of Isyashvus because it's not Isyashvus Sichli, it's Isyashvus an emes. I think he even talks about it now. I remember in chapter 42. Wait, man, the Rebbe Rashab, what a surgeon! This is like you need a scalpel. If you don't,
trouble with who's the Makabel and who's the
well, just to keep ourselves grounded, Binah has to be the Makabel and Chochma is the Mashpia. That's for sure.
When you say
It sounds to me that there's an element where the student's concentration, I believe I'm the student, you're the teacher. My concentration enters inside of you. You see my concentration, so you respond in turn. So when my presence enters into you and you see it, that's like the Havan b'Chochma. That sounds like a resonance. Something it's connected for some reason with resonance.
But isn't the level of Chochma purely the level of the Mashpia? Even though you say Havan.
No, but then we're talking about Yichud. There's a Yichud now of Mashpia and Makabel. They're coming together.
Isn't that when isn't that the Chochma the Binah the Chochma?
No, then he says, and that leads the Binah going into Chochma, then leads Chochma to go into Binah, which seems to me that now the teacher is giving him the core idea. So it's almost like the Binah and the Chochma is the bittul of the Makabel going into the Mashpia, and then comes the Mashpia's response as he transmits the idea in its core level. It sounds to me like that. But I don't want to jump and say that because it doesn't really spell it out that way. Let's read on. We have to read to the end of the chapter. There's no way. Because he's in the middle of the subject. We didn't finish it. I know. Okay. Also, I'm not even going back to, I'm going to find the sources for this chapter in the Alter Rebbe, in the Tzemach Tzedek, Mittler Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek. I want to see how it says it there. This is no question, this is not just original stuff here. This is taken from the Alter Rebbe, but he's explaining it. I could see from the language. So it's probably the Mittler Rebbe, because this is Mittler Rebbe's style, where he goes into abstractions in levels that are like almost...
How do you find it?
Well, here I would look right now in Imre Binah and the Perek Mems and Nuns.
So you know more or less.
I've learned a few things in my life.
Nobody made it.
No, I'm making it. I'm making Makemas all over the place. I have a whole online. I make Makedas for every chapter. Ich kann dir weisen, wie man tut das. It's nicht, dass ich schwere dem Ernst. You trace it by looking, for example, all the Maimorim are built on, example, the Sugis in this Maimorim right here, Yisrael Saba Tfuna is Elushmeis and Teira Eir. So you start with there. And you start looking over all the Maimorim that are based on Teira Eir and Teira Chaim and Eira Teira. That's a good place to begin. But you have to have patience. You have to go through the Mizad Hagos. You start seeing Aloshim from Al Arab and the Tzemach Tzedek ask questions. This sounds to me, Havam v'Chochma Chacham Binah is a sugya also in the Frierdiker Rebbe talks about it, but it starts on the Mittler Rebbe. But the Mittler Rebbe is the one that dissects it very, very detailed. But Mittler Rebbe not always on a Chochma, because when you go from this to the Mittler Rebbe, it's like going from the frying pan into the fire, which means it gets sometimes far more complicated. Because Mittler Rebbe, this is often far more grounded. But when you read the Mittler Rebbe, then you read this. It's like you ever see, if you want to lift 500 pounds, lift 1,000 pounds. Then 500 pounds are easier to lift. So I look at the Mittler Rebbe and I get so confused that this becomes clear. Yeah, that's what happens often. Because the Mittler Rebbe is a yam. See, the Mittler Rebbe is a yam. The Rebbe Rashab explains things. There's a line, explanation.
So did you say said this was in talk of the Hor?
The Rebbe Rashab.
From Imre Binah?
Yeah. He says his hair fell out from Imre Binah, the Rebbe Rashab. So my hair did not fall out from Imre Binah. It fell out long before.
You're ready.
Actually, that's what happened when I was working the Sichos. Yeah, I don't know if it came from that. My father had a head full of hair till the last day, so I don't know where it came from. It's not, maybe skips a generation. Who cares if it doesn't matter?
Yeah. You say it's a yam, but it's a yam in the sense we're learning yam today.
The Mittler Rebbe is a trip, man, my friends. The Mittler Rebbe, I wouldn't even take on the Mittler Rebbe. It's just too formidable, impossible. The problem with the Mittler Rebbe is like this. My problem. It's such a yam, there's no end. Here, You could. I know that we'll figure this out because here he is. He's referring to chapters. We got to just. This is a puzzle. We got to put it together. The Mittler Rebbe. The problem is when you learn it. It's a challenge. He goes and suddenly goes another track, and you don't know you're on another track. And then suddenly you realize there's another. Suddenly he says that there's a second track. Then you realize there's a third track, and it gets so complicated you don't know where you are. Literally swimming in an ocean. So like at some point there's no bearings, there's no coordinates. You're here. So the chassidus of it lifts you completely into Elokus. It's like that. But there's really no boundaries. It's Binah in the full sense. Recheves Hanar. It's Binah in the full sense of the word. That's why you need the Alter Rebbe. You go back in the grounds and you realize, that's where the Mittler Rebbe is elaborating on a paragraph from the Alter Rebbe. He could elaborate on a paragraph from the Alter Rebbe for 40 pages. Without repeating himself. You understand what that means?
Right?
And the Alter Rebbe is in a code that you don't really get. This is overwhelming. The Tzemach Tzedek is the one that really grounds it much more, because the Tzemach Tzedek will go back and create some parameters. And then comes the Rebbe Mara. You have to really, each mimer is different. There's no rules.
Let me get guys. Let's swim a little bit.
V'hi shemislabeshes b'chinas primis bina, sho'inyan chochem b'bina. And he, the Nukud, the Hanochas Sichlis, now manifests in the inner dimension of bina. And that's chochem b'bina. V'ikri yichud primi da'avo. Okay, this finishes this topic, and it is very cryptic, but we have to go back to Perek Mem Beis. I have the basics of it, but I don't have the Havana, and also some things need. Okay. And the primary thing of this unity, the inner unity of Abba ve'Ima, Chochma Bina, Hushabini gam kein b'chinas hasagas hamohus. Oh man, he's going back to the beginning of the chapter. Now he's explaining hasagas hamohus. That also Bina should come to comprehension of the core. Mahus, the essence of it all. That's the
answer about the Tzilus, right? That there's a
yeah, but it's also coming to explain Yichud Pnimi of Ava. Yeah, becoming the end of the beginning chapter. How do we have a taste of it? So he's saying now that this, because of the Yichud Pnimi, that when you have that type of bittul and connection to the core idea, and you're concentrating, that's what he's saying. That allows you, that Bina should start having appreciation of Chochma, and that you should have a Sagas Amuhus. So just like Chochma is Riyas Amuhus, you actually see the thing itself, like clarity. Also, Bina comes, the Pnimius of Bina, not Chitzenius Bina. The Pnimius of Bina is Sagas Amuhus. Oh boy, this just makes things even more. He said, now he's back to Riyah. He took the Saga Riyah. God Almighty.
But the Hasag is not a Riyah.
That's what you're coming to explain, right? How it's
Sagas Amuhus. Yeah. Look at the beginning of chapter Kuf Lamed Ches. Kuf Lamed Ches, he asked the question.
Yeah, Kuf Lamed Ches, he asked.
Kuf Lamed Ches is the explanation of Kuf Lamed Zayin.
How can we touch God? How can we really...
Benachas. You're rushing somewhere?
He's standing too long on this one station, Stations, everything.
This is just the beginning. I'm not going so fast away from this till I get this a little more. There's too many secrets here. Then it's like the hasaga that will be lost. Remember, you said before, Achshav, today we don't really have hasagas amuhus. This is a taste of comprehension as it'll be in the future. Sheyeh b'mechusa ein seif. It'll be in the mechusa of ein seif, the core, not chitzenius, not just the surface level of Ein Sof, the core. And it'll be actually fully comprehensible. That's the thing that's impossible to understand today. How do you can understand the Metzias of Ein Sof, you can understand the Mahus of this world. But to have Asaga, a comprehension in something that is the Mahus so far beyond us seems impossible. That will be in the future. Aymashi's Bar Lakamon, Perek Reish Chav Zayin. Look 227 later. Mm-hmm. So one second. So the Ikerin Yuchid Pnimi is that Bina will be Asagas Amuhus. In other words, not just the resonance of Chochma, but actually Asagas Amuhus, which is, he says, a taste of the resonance. Okay. We're going to have to use our little Chabad minds here to figure out the Havon of it, but I think it's clear. It's basically Chochma and Bina Chochma and Binah are imparting. See, let's go back to the core of the idea here. Chochma is representing Ein Sof, Elokus. Right? It's representing outside of the structure. Binah is representing the structure. On an external level, we talked about that's already a relationship with midas, with inclinations, chesed, gvurat, nivdal memena. That's outside. But what is going on internally in Chochma Binah, in the internal engine room there? So they have a profound relationship where the Binah, the comprehension of Binah, though it's not comprehension, is focusing to appreciate the core idea of Chochma. In turn, it receives the resonance of Chochma, and in turn, it gives Chochma an element, something to hold on to, handles. That's what we're talking about here. That's the key, what he's saying here. That's how we have to look at it, and then we have to figure out exactly how each level does that properly. So Binah, is giving handles to Chochma, and Chochma is giving resonance and truth to Binah. That's what's going on. So Muhus is coming from Chochma, Hasag is coming from Binah, but they're joining. They only join in the Pnimi. In Chitzeni they don't join. And resonance is a taste of it. The problem is, well, what do you mean? Yeah, they end up being both Muhus, but Muhus is coming primarily from Chochma. Binah is not a Muhus thing. Binah is a Hasag thing. Hasag is outside of Muhus. But Chochma allows it in, and today, where we taste it today is in resonance. The challenge I'm having is understanding technically in our own minds, where does Chochma begin and where does Binah begin? Like, how does it work exactly? Let's give an example of a cognitive process. It's nice to talk about it abstractly, but how does it work? You have a flash of an idea, you develop the idea. Fine. There's an inner dimension to it all, which is the core wisdom of it, like the Ragachovra example. But how does the Binah Chochma work on that core level? That's where the challenge is to really understand. We'll go there. I'll get back to it. I'm just spelling it out. That's what we need to give thought to. How those two communicate in the subtle level of the core level, where they are. But I think the teacher-student example is the key. You have to see how it works with the teachers. When a student actually is being mitzamtzim himself and focusing, concentrating, what is actually happening in the dynamic between him and the teacher when they're both concentrating on a profound thing. Something's happening there. That's the key to
touch the mahus without zayin uis. The whole union of tzimtzum
and hasage.
Uis. Sound level of chokhmah, level of binah.
Excellent point. So you need to be ois, meaning you have to strip yourself of your personality to go there. Right. But you also want it back into hasage.
Yeah.
So that's why in other words, if the teacher was alone in his room and he's focusing on the core idea, okay, that's Sisamtus, that's Chochma Sheba Chochma. You want it to come into somewhere in a makabel. Remember, at the end of the day, it's an interface. It's true, it's not the level of going into midas, which is really going outside of yourself. It's all within the intellect. But Binah here is serving as the first, let's call it, experiment of Chochma outside of itself. That's really what we're talking about here. So Binah is Binah is stripping itself of its personality in order to go there. So that's where like in a student and teacher, it's easier to understand, but how does it work in Chochma Binah? What happens exactly? Does this mean what he said before? This is maybe what he meant. Remember he said before that the Eitzah, what's the Eitzah to get to resonance once you're in the Seichel? You have to go back to Chochma.
This moment, strip yourself.
And go back to Chochma and reconnect.
To the moment.
To the moment, and let that permeate your Hasaga. That's probably what's going on here. So in other words, Binah is your comprehension, fine. Now you have to go back from that comprehension back to the source, reconnect to that resonance, and now the resonance will come into the tamtzis of the summation of Binah that already has that resonance. That's it. That key. Because he said that in the previous chapter. I forgot about that point.
Binah and this.
Right. So this is a real marriage between Binah and Chochma, back and forth. Chochma goes to Binah, Binah back to Chochma, and then you have the tamtzis, that the summation of Binah has it, and there you have a taste of Hasagas Muhus, which will be in full glory, Lasad Loving. Wow. The whole interface is working right here. Without even Chochmas Timar. What do you think about that?
But it is.
Okay. So now let's continue. So that's the Ikir. Okay. We can't say it. The Isamtus part seems to be referring to Perek Mem Beis, a higher level of Chochma that's on its own. That's clear. He's saying it, and that's a shashvus of its own. It's not really. It's beyond. It's Chochma Shebachachma. Very good. Okay. She's got lost. This is the reason. The timing means here the reasons. That was the hasaga, the understanding of the reasons of the Torah that will be revealed in the future. She is b'chinas hasaga mamish. B'mehus alakus will be literally understood. In the mehus of alakus, we will actually comprehend mehus, which today is a contradiction. You comprehend; it's not the core of godliness, because comprehension implies on your terms. See, it's both on our terms and God's terms. This is the perfect interface. And this is the revelation of the core pleasure, core enig, that will be in the future through Binah. The revelation of Atik in Binah, not just in Chochma. However, his Galus Atik B'Binah is only a reflection. Oh, one second. There'll be the etzem enig v'yavli de hasaga gemura de habina. Not just Chochma will sense that deeper essence. Today it's a sense, it's an intuition, it's an awe, it's a mystery. There will be, like we comprehend things that we fully understand, that'll be that full comprehension in those levels. That says by Losser, just like by Mitzrayim, it says it was that he split, the sea was parted into 12. So it says v'heinu yodei nad, he will spread his arm, he will wave his arm over the river, the Binah. Nad is Binah, and wave over the Binah. She has galus b'chinas Ayin, shezo etzem atayni shebepnimis Chochma. So it says over Eiyar, the Nar is Binah. He'll wave his arm over the Binah and it will split. So, in other words, we'll reveal within it the Ayin, which is that's a mataynig, that's in the Pnimis of Chochma. The Pnimis Abba Pnimis Atik, because the inner dimension of Abba of Chochma is the inner dimension of Atik. His galus Atik b'Binah. V'yeh b'chinas hasaga yedei Binah, the Pnimis Binah gam ken Pnimis Atik. And it'll be a comprehension through Binah. Yeah, it says it. Because the inner dimension of Binah is also the inner dimension of Atik. We'll discuss later what's the difference then. V'chochma b'chinas ziyah. Oh, here we go. V'chochma b'chinas ziyah, u'Binah b'chinas hasaga. Chochma Atik is in the form of seeing, and in Binah it's in the form of comprehension. And then will be a combination of both. Remember, seeing has the power of seeing the real essence. Comprehension has the power that it's ours. In some way you own it belongs to you. It's internalized. Like you said, it's integrated. Shashvus. Resonance on its own is not a shashvus. Binah creates shashvus, creates internalization. Yeah.
Remember.
Yeah.
About the Santos.
Yeah.
The shashvus.
I think he means Yisashvus more. I have to go back to Perek Mem Beis. I think Yisashvus there, he means more that it's clear to you, clarity. That's not like elusive. But it's not relevant here. No, it's relevant only in the sense because that is something clear is going to come into Binah, l'asad lavi, because you can have Riyah. I think there's Riyah, there's Asagas HaMuchus, then there's Yitzias HaMitzias. And that's the steps here. But let's see here. V'zeu shi'urak ha'nofal ha'nar v'lo she'yachrim eiseh. That's why it's only a waving over the river and not yachrim. Like by the Lashon by Kriyas Yamsuf, it says K'may haloshin yam diksiv by vahechrim.
How would you touch that in this context?
Hechrim is more like a chedem. Chedem is more like sealing.
Right, it's clarity, no?
The Heinef is waving, right? Heinef yodei. The hechrim sounds more like just wave. You're actually going in and parting the sea. I mean, the word hechrim comes from like chedem. Or hechrim definitely comes from the word.
Clarity.
No, the hechrim, the lashon is hechrim al yachim yodei. It's also the same teichen. The hechrim. Ba'im ruchi. That's l'asad lavi. The hechrim is another lashon. I think on Kriyas. 1 second. Hechrim is on Kriyas Yamsuf, not on l'asad lavi. Yeah, that's what he's saying. It's a different. Doesn't
say it in the Torah. Maybe in
In Tanakh, yeah, in the Novi. Shayach Moise means not just you wave, but sometimes like you actually literally like you strike it or move away the water. I think it means like to separate or divide. I have to look it up. Why? Because Yachrim would imply it's almost by force, and Heinif is more of, I guess, because there'll be comprehension in the future and there'll be comprehension of the muhus. And above is the core of the kav. We learned before v'ikri pnimis hakav. Hanimshu b'pnimis atzmus ein sof. Primarily is the imiter kav. Now he's saying there's atzmus hakav, and now he's saying there's pnimis hakav, which nimshach b'pnimis atzmus ein sof. Commission is borei peiru kuflam zayin, right there, like we learned before, chapter 137. Hamislavish b'pnimis chochma binah, which manifests in the inner chochma binah. V'husha ama atzmus hakav netzel b'chinas chochma shehi lahaskel. That means from the core of the kav, which is rooted in the Chochma of the 10 hidden spheres. Is the Chochma is emanates from the core of the kav, as we said, all the way from the 10 hidden spheres Chochma. Shehula Haskel, what is that? Could say the kavana here is riyah, so that will be the comprehension la'asid love. What's the chidush here? B'mehus kav, the ability to appreciate the core of the kav, and afterwards emanates the level of binah. And that's to comprehend and to meditate and to contemplate on the core of the kav, of this kav. No. This goes back to this is clear what he's saying before. This is clear. 1 second. Well, why is the vehenif? Why is the henif? It's only waving. It's like an Indian of soga.
It doesn't be forced.
That's what he means. Yeah. Okay. So let's read the kitzur. Let's read the kitzur.
Stop saying it's Shon Isha at that point.
The Inyan Meitzer Yam and me, who Inyan Yichud Primi the Mashpir Bakal. What's Meitzer Yam and me? Meitzer Yam. Oh, Yam is this.
Yam is Chochma.
Kamei Aloshin Yam, the Ksib Bei V'Hechlim. V'hin Yifyad Al Anor. It's both there, it says V'Hichlim Al Yam, and here's V'hin Yifal Anor. That's another word.
See the pasuk.
V'heinef al anor is Binah, and Yam is Chochma.
Yeah.
So Hichlim is both Yam. Okay.
It's like the opposite. It's like you would think the other way.
Okay, Kitzer, the Meitzer Yam and me, who in Yichud Pnimi the Mashpia Makabel. Meitzer Yam and me is the unity of the inner unity of the Mashpia Makabel, of the transmitter and the recipient. When the recipient takes and Kalet, says the word Kalet now.
Kalet is with a Kalet.
Before he said Kalet was what was Kalet? Klita was Tfuna. Pina. Okay. When the Kalet, he retains the core kavanah intention and of the teacher through concentrating and focus in the core of the comprehension. And the mashpia transmits to him the core, the depth of the intelligence. When he has to answer him on his profound question, it's from the depths of this core of the root of the source of the intelligence. And all depth comes through concentrated through a narrow focus. And this is the meaning of Havan b'Chochma. Here we go. Binah and Chochma lahavi etzem hanochash sichlis. The Havan b'Chochma is to bring the core resonance. Yeah, like we said in Binah. V'Chochma b'Binah lekabel b'pnimius habinah. A Chochma Binah that should be received in the core, in the inner dimension of Binah. The main primary union of the inner union of Abba V'Imah canal is the understanding of the actual essence of the entity. This will be the comprehension in the future. The Binah, the B'chinas Atzmis HaKav, B'chinas HaChoch, and B'chinas HaSog, B'chinas HaBinah. This is V'heinef Yad Al Anor. Wave his arm over the river. the river of Binah, that the core kav, which is the emek, the depth, the river on its own is just expanded ideas. When you split it, you're getting the core. That's from within, that's Chochma. Let me see a second. Yeah, that's the word. She is Galus B'chins Ayin. You're getting the Ayin, which is the Etzem Hatainu Pnimis Chochma, is coming now into Binah, to be comprehended in the level of the inner dimension of Binah, but not the outer dimension of Binah, because you still need existence to be in its structure. Okay, we stop here. We did chapter 139, page 268, through the top of 270.